In a brutal age, assassination became the quickest road to power, slipping in as a silent blade and cutting through enemies while war tore across the land. Deep in the heart of the city, the Knights of Glory sealed themselves inside a hidden fortress, tightening every guard, and dread crept through the halls like smoke. Master Devaya scanned the spy's report, and it confirmed that Raid had officially launched his mission. Leaders ramp up the defenses, bracing for a clash that's about to explode any moment now. In the darkness, Raid watched them closely, already squeezing the pressure on their moves without even throwing a strike. A sudden swarm of weird birds dove onto the fortress, and the guards on the walls snapped into alarm as dark shadows raced across the courtyard. Archers snapped into position, convinced it was just a small disturbance, and loosed volleys into the sky as panicked civilians scattered below. Madir unleashed the birds and the blast tore through the air, stones shattered, and armored knights got slammed backward like they'd been hit by a thunderclap. Blinding blasts ripped through the defenses, and the soldiers crumbled into chaos while debris rained down across the stronghold. Through the smoke and shattered streets, desperate screams tore the air as the brutal assault finally ripped their master wide open. A violent blast slammed into Master Devaya, then her glowing pendant snapped to life, gulped up the deadly damage, and left her reeling as debris rained down all around. She realized that sacrificial magic tool had just saved her life, and as smoke curled over the ruined courtyard, she braced herself. Devaya faced her forces and warned them those tools wouldn't snap back to life instantly, then demanded total, extra-hard vigilance. Suddenly, the fortress walls tore open with massive explosions, rattling the ground like it was about to crack in half. Suddenly, hidden charges ripped through the earth, detonating underground and revealing a vicious act of sabotage no one ever saw coming. While everything erupted into chaos, a strange device crashed to the ground, shattering the belief that plain explosives were the ones causing all this destruction. Elsewhere, Rai calmly admitted the truth. He didn't plant bombs at all. He smuggled in magic power injection tools meant to rip off the safety and unleash total destruction. Perched birds bombarded him with coded whispers, and each one proved the operation was rolling forward. A system ping blared, mission cleared, top marks, no questions asked. In the real world, Rate yanked off his headset, and just like that, his cover as a virtual life online player slipped out in silence. Raid said that if the explosives were buried deeper than 5 meters, the shock would get swallowed up underground, so even the high-level players wouldn't take lethal damage. But that rule only worked for plain planted bombs and the same old predictable game plan. This time, he jammed him with magic power injection devices that would blow the moment they got flooded with too much mana, even if all that surrounded them was plain, crumbling rubble. Even when his enemies swore their countermeasures would eventually shut down any assassination plan, Rate didn't bat an eye. He stayed completely unbothered. Using his production skill like a weapon, he slammed in a fresh attack mid-fight and drove straight toward finishing his mission. Raid gripped the wing device in front of him, wondering how much longer this assassination trick could stay deadly on a battlefield that keeps changing. With his production job, he forged tools and weapons piece by piece, turning himself into a full-blown assassin inside a massive virtual world. In the online virtual world, death didn't just restart the level, it hit with brutal consequences that no regular game could even touch. Any Fallen's player got a level ripped away and got hit with a mandatory 3-day ban from logging in. For elite players, one penalty erased hundreds of hours of grind, wiping out progress they'd fought tooth and nail to build. Bayon started dropping levels, getting players wiped out, then hitting temporary login bans, until the punishment got so brutal it yanked them right out of the moments that mattered most. In the middle of territorial guild wars, when the main force gets wiped out and can't come back, the weakened faction gets crushed. Defeat is basically guaranteed. Normally, the only thing that happened was players got knocked out and hauled back to town to be revived, so it was super hard to just wipe them out for good. Real death only came from the biggest bosses or ruthless rival players, if the stars aligned just right. Even so, the world still stocked plenty of protective gear, so living didn't come down to pure muscle, it came down to what you brought and how ready you were. The lone top guild sent in a whole stack of countermeasures, so getting killed in direct combat was almost impossible. When the major guild wars ignited, guilds hurled assassins at one another, choking the battlefield into a deadly, silent showdown outside the main front line. Most assassins trained for hit-and-slay combat roles, arching down targets from range or slicing in with dual blades, because they crushed enemies in the open by dealing devastating damage. Great took the grim production job to forge poisons and explosives, but in a straight fight he'd still get steamrolled. Even when he faced the top elite guilds, his assassination hits landed with a crazy 99.9% success rate. After pulling off 1,000+ assassination missions with just one single screw-up, Rate started believing his streak blew every other virtual assassin out of the water. As he hustled through the city streets, a notification suddenly blared, "Rare new mail," tagged high priority, calling him right in. He opened it and there it was. A message from a mystery woman calling herself Goddess Mrs. begging for his help. Stunned, he remembered one brutal rule. Divine titles were locked out and didn't normally get to exist as player names. Even with doubts clawing at him, he launched a search anyway, praying that the sender people talked about really existed. The second he searched her name, the line snapped to life, and a glowing interface lit up, declaring the sender was Goddess Mrs. A mysterious woman stepped in and swore the divine title was real, hinting that none of those rules could touch her. She swore the game was born from her hands, picking the name she alone was allowed to say while everyone else was locked out. Even with her doubts roaring in her head, Rate chose to stop and demand the full story behind her outrageous request. The mission was unlike anything anyone had ever faced. Assassinate an evil god from another world named Masarazuli. Raid confessed he'd never even heard the target's name, and he figured the mission would be a breeze once they finally pinned down the location. He demanded compensation and insisted on getting paid in gold, so the whole deal stayed clean and simple. The goddess shot back with a wildly outrageous prize, a whopping 1,000 tons of pure gold. Doubt flickered across his face as he grilled her for realness and wondered if she could actually keep her cool. Still, she swore the payment was the real deal, quivering with how priceless it was, then promised she'd make them whole with compensation from another world. Doubt sparked in her mind as she challenged the claim about another world, and Reyes had to wonder just how far that kind of delusion could spread inside a game. After a quick beat, he made up his mind, nodded at Mrs. straight to the point, and agreed without a second thought. The goddess erupted in pure joy, throwing a no-holds-barred celebration the moment he got accepted. Rate reminded her that it was all trapped inside a game and she shot back hard. No, that idea wasn't happening. To prove she wasn't messing around, she whipped out a teleportation stone and promised instant passage straight past their world. Without waiting for anyone's okay, the teleportation stone burst to life, spiraling light wrapped around him and yanked him away. Right as the change hit, it dawned on him he couldn't bring a thing, so he panicked, then scrambled to beg for intel on the target. The goddess verified his target was the evil god Masarazul, then fired up his resolve, telling him to stay locked in the moment he arrived. Moments later, he blinked, and the next thing he knew, he was dumped in a strange forest miles away from his gear and the people who'd been backing him. Ray tapped his interface and there it was. His inventory was bone dry. He finally got it. He had to launch the mission totally unprepared. Raid spun in place inside the strange forest, and the moment it hit him, he realized the link to his original game world was totally gone. He scanned the area and realized the view was too real. Nothing online could ever fake it because it looked exactly like reality. As he reached that conclusion, doubt gnawed at him, because no computer system he knew could possibly churn out detail and scale like this. Suddenly, the goddess swallowed her pride and apologized. She confessed she couldn't pick his exact destination. She confessed her power was slipping. Fewer and fewer believers drained the divine strength she started with. The goddess flat out said divine power doesn't run on magic, it runs on believers. Lose faith and a god crumbles, fades away and gets erased from everyone's memory. She admitted that Masarazul had already obliterated the other gods, so now she's stranded, alone and hanging on by a thread. Rate realized the summon wasn't a favor at all. It was a hit job to wipe out a rival deity, all while she fought tooth and nail to stay alive. Digging deeper, he uncovered a chilling truth. Master Azul didn't just have one name, different follower groups swore by different ones. To wipe out a god like that, believers have to be wiped away or turned. Right now, a ruthless plan is already tearing across the world. The goddess shot a warning through the air. Her power was slipping, the bond was about to snap, and when it did, Raid would be left alone in the forest with nothing but darkness. Her voice shattered as she begged him to take down Master Azul, swore his reward would come. Then the link vanished. Silence hung in the air, but Raid was sure, like a gut punch telling her this mission was the right move, even with her stranded. With survival screaming in his head, he pushed into the wilderness, set everything up, and only then dared to plan his assassination. He raced through the place, finding nothing, no people, no usual tools in sight. Raid flipped the switch on his search power, blasting a detection field across the forest, and spotting a whole cluster of mid-level threats lurking just nearby. Once he tested his abilities and they worked perfectly, he figured out this whole world ran on the same rules as the game he'd mastered back then. He cast a spell and conjured clean water on the spot, then braced himself to face the brutal wilderness all alone to survive right now. After tasting success, he decided his production skills weren't done yet, and he needed to keep using them right here in this world. Spying bauxite embedded in the rock face, he decided to grab the metal first and start forging the gear he'd need. They tear aluminum out of bauxite, then grind the ore down and blast it through magic until it turns into clean, usable metal. He shoved the material into a tight little block, keeping in mind the limits of his tools. With metamorphosis, the block twisted into a razor-slim needle, forged for silent strikes. Just off to the side, he spotted Deathroot, a poisonous plant that could supercharge his weapon and turn it lethal in a heartbeat. He ground the root, smeared the needle with that ape's coating, and finished a simple little weapon that could kill before anyone even saw it coming. Raid tried to yank open his status and item box. Nothing popped up on screen, and that alone proved this world didn't run on the same game rules. Since menus couldn't show his real power, he ditched the theory and went straight for hard, practical combat testing. Locking onto that nearby monster, he snapped into action, unleashing a martial arts technique, and ended it with one crushing, decisive kick. Seeing the outcome, he realized his offensive power hadn't faded one bit. It was still just as brutal as before. With the perimeter locked down and the water set, Rate sized up his odds and decided surviving was almost worry-free. Seeing the light dying fast, he chose to build shelter before night hit, because pushing onward into the dark was pure risk. With metamorphosis, he turned aluminum into a brutal, sturdy saw and lined up the materials for a lightning-fast build. He tore through the forest, chopping trees down fast and stacking the logs into tight, orderly piles for later assembly. After wiping the land clean and laying down the marks, he hauled in timber and stone and plotted every detail, lining up his whole structure like it was ready to rise. He slammed the extraction and transformation together, throwing up walls and supports in one furious burst to raise a simple house. With one last blast of magic, Raid slammed the house into completion and stood in the silent forest, staring at the finished structure like he'd just rewired the world. Relief washed over him as he checked the structure, solid, locked in place, and totally secure. He stepped inside, took one look around the huge place, and decided it was more than enough for him to live alone. Once shelter was locked down, his mind snapped to the next mission, finding the supplies he'd need to survive for the long haul. He mulled over forging artifacts fueled by mana stones, convinced they could supercharge advanced spells and set him up for whatever came next. With the shelter finally done, Raid grinned and went hunting for mana stones, taking them straight off monsters. Before he even dared to step toward any creature, he grabbed every scrap he could find and double-checked his small stash of gear like it could make or break everything. He realized his aluminum couldn't forge a real blade, and that poisoned needle wasn't meant for food, so he scrapped the plan and went for a whole new way. With metamorphosis, he twisted raw wood into a sleek, curved bow built for ranged combat. He spun tough fibers into a string, snapped the weapon together, and then stepped back, ready to hunt. Ripped strong fibers from the nearby vines, twisted them together into tight braids, then sealed the whole bundle with magic to make it unbreakable. He hauled the woven cord tight on the wooden frame, then finished the bow's final tweak. He also fletched a whole stash of arrows, so he'd never run out in the middle of a fight. He fired up the search again, tore through the forest with his eyes and stamped nearby enemies as targets. He snapped his eyes on the nearest heartbeat, darted through the trees to scout the scene, then launched his attack. Perched on a tree branch, Rada spots a huge frog lurking below like a monster, and then calmly lines up his shot, wondering if it's finally something he can eat. His first shot doesn't hit hard at all. It only snaps the creature's attention and proves it'll take something way stronger to bring it down. The monster croaks like thunder, then rockets into the air, soaring high to slam straight into the distance and, hanging on the edge, anticipating the jump, rains down full-force shots from above, using his high ground to carve the moment wide open. A volley of arrows thrusts a dagger through the frog midair, blasting it backward as the onslaught smashes straight through its body. Raid whips another arrow through the air, and it blasts the frog's outstretched tongue mid-attack, cutting off its counterstrike. Eyes locked in, deadly calm, he mutters, "If one shot isn't enough, then I'll just take more." A final barrage blasts the monster into nothing, and a notification erupts, "Mission complete." Back at his place, he starts cooking frog meat, a little unsure but still determined to take a bite. Once the food, water, and safety were locked down, Rate proudly declared that surviving here is almost unbelievably easy. Rate carefully, he peels the frog open and hunts down the poison sac, proving that his dissection has to be spot on. He carefully hauls out multiple sacs without tearing a single one, knowing that one monster frog alone swallows around 10. After he finishes that meticulous work, he can't help wondering what kind of mana stone power that creature is hiding. He lifts the crystal up to the light, sizes up the monster's power, and gives it a sharp verdict: this one is good enough to use. Grinning, he checks his reward and realizes he just scored both food and a mana stone by taking down the frog. Rate grinds to a stop in his thoughts, chasing one brutal goal, killing the evil god Masara Zulu. Yet he can't shake the fear of what this god truly is, and he's starting to doubt the goddess who sent him in the first place. Still, those doubts don't stop him. He shrugs off his hesitation as pointless and tosses his worries aside. Once he signs the contract, he goes all in on the mission and starts gearing up to forge those artifacts. Rape laid out his workshop materials and geared up to forge a deadly artifact, one that could sniff out magical energy using alchemy and assassination techniques. With metamorphosis, he hacked and reshaped what he had, even with barely any supplies, forging a clunky but functional gadget right in his own hands. Magic was poured into the structure with precision, locking the balance tight while power surged along its frame. A violent surge ripped downward, blasting the floor with shockwaves as the artifact snapped to life and tore through the magic around it. Calmly seated, he watched the Rate confirm it. This thing only answered to spellcasting power. Raid studied the artifact's behavior and realized one thing: it wouldn't wake up unless humans fed it magic, because monsters and animals were packed with power, yet they couldn't cast spells. To prove his theory, he slammed the spike down and unleashed a razor-sharp burst that hit the ground with total control. The spike hung there, dripping with pure magic, and it basically screamed, this is the absolute limit of what his materials can handle. No hesitation, Rate fired off the next adjustment like it was already planned. Channeling energy again, he snapped into action, binding it with magic and sharpening the object's purpose even further. Rate powered up the magic detector, scanning its structure as the wild energy snapped into place and turned into a steady, confident glow. With the stuff he had, he figured he could hit about a kilometer, good enough for a beginner, so he tagged it level construction. To test its performance, he dumped pure water beside the artifact and stared intently until he saw it react the way it should. A faint rumble rolled in and it screamed that something was detected just within range, while he stayed cool, watching the reaction closely. With things finally settled, Rape fired up a small outdoor fire and cooked frog meat beside his house for a simple meal. Breathless from casting spell after spell, Rape finally clocked it. His mana was almost gone, and he still had a tiny campfire burning beside his house. Still, he kept the forge fire barely alive, roasting those skewered frog pieces nice and steady. Flames surged up around the skewers, sizzling as the fat dripped, and the surface charred deeper with every breath of heat. He decided patience mattered, so he let the meat keep cooking, even as hunger clawed at him because he refused to risk a sick stomach. Finally, Rate cast a quick little spell, yanked out salt and seasoning, and then dived into his meal. Rate carefully nibbled the freshly roasted frog, checking that tender bite and seasoning hits right after he dusted it with a pinch of extracted salt. As he chewed, a vivid scene of lively frogs and roaring splashes burst through his mind, all because that rich flavor hit his senses. Totally against what he expected, the meat came out way greasier, and somehow even more satisfying, hitting him with a rich depth he never saw coming. Alone under the night sky, he kept chewing without stopping, each bite turning his hunger sharper, hotter, and more impossible to ignore. After mowing through several skewers, Rates eyed the leftover pile and wondered what move came next. Raid toyed with the idea of building a refrigerator from mana stones, then realized grabbing materials at night would mean fighting monsters, so he chose to dodge that nightmare instead. So he slammed his item box open, shoved the leftover frog meat inside, and wondered if it would rot before he ever used it. He kicked the door shut, dropped his stuff, and decided he'd deal with the preservation worry only when it actually mattered. Lying flat on the floor, he realized just how dangerous it is to chase other people without proper preparation. For now, he decided to stick to brewing potions first, before he ever dared to touch anything more dangerous. Morning broke the moment Rate stepped out of his cabin, and the forest fell eerily quiet as he stared down the very next priority. Cramped from sleeping on that rock-hard floor, he swore he'd hunt for mattress materials later. Right now, something more urgent demanded his focus. As he scoured the nearby woods, he spotted familiar herbs tucked in the underbrush, and the moment he laid eyes on them, he knew exactly how valuable they were. Mia's herb, once it was properly enchanted and brewed just right, could churn out basic potions on demand. Fueled by that win, Rape dove into harvesting with sharp focus, collecting just enough to keep his potion brewing right up until. Once he'd gathered enough of Mia's herb, he double-checked the pile was plenty, then hurried to start brewing inside his cabin. He stomped the plants to pulp, stirred their bitter sap into water, then heated the mixture as he fed it with a perfectly controlled surge of magic. Steam curled up in waves as the mixture surged to a boil, and he watched the reaction like a hawk, never speeding up, never slipping. As the spell finally settled down, the liquid turned crystal clear, locking in a brand new, fully finished level 2 potion. Even if it wasn't top tier, that potion still healed him solidly, just right for where he was at. Inside the cabin, Rate stared over his finished potions, itching to brew even stronger ones, even as he had to admit his stash right now was still more than useful. While he was checking his tools, he realized he didn't have the right flasks to safely hold the extra batches. With a flash of metamorphosis, he twisted whatever materials he could find into tough bottles, ready for the brews to come. The ants were filled, the potions sealed tight, and now the finished vials sat lined up in front of him, perfect, ready to be unleashed in combat. Ray geared up for the day, then stayed close by hunting monsters and plotting his next artifact finds. He snapped his detection artifact to life, blasting a search grid across the forest and sweeping the area for any hostile presence within range. Eyes locked in, he counted every nearby monster and calculated exactly how many mana stones he could scoop up. All day long, he hunted creature after creature, darting in with lightning strikes and snatching up the stones each fight left behind. By sunset, he held several mana stones in his palms, solid proof he'd been making real progress, then headed back home. Rate dove into his next construction plan, and once he clocked these resources, he could crank out multiple brand new artifacts. Back inside, Raid stared at a stone man, weighing whether he should craft flashbangs into a quick support weapon. Knowing he'd be torching something precious, he bit down on the cost and smashed the stone anyway. He kept crushing those fragments down to a dusty fine powder, prepping them for a magical upgrade. With light magic surging through him, he poured that energy into the scattered fragments, then POW, a quick flash burst to life. Even though every blast only flared for a blink, he knew that flash-burned blindness could turn the fight his way. He stacked countless glowing fragments together, then pushed and tested them until he found exactly how much light they could unleash as one blazing, concentrated mass. Sensing that the raw energy was about to explode out of control, he slammed it together with merge, crushing it into a perfectly contained sphere. The condensed core hardened into a tight little device, and with that, he finally finished his first working flashbang. Still craving more, he crushed extra stones and ran the whole process again until he had plenty. After wrapping up the third device, Ray threw his arms wide and let out a breath, realizing the work was way tougher than he ever expected. After the flashbangs were done, he replayed every second in his head, realizing that sure, it was exhausting, but way easier than building advanced artifacts. Then, suddenly, inside the cabin, the magic detector flared bright and fierce, screaming that spells were now alive and being cast right within its range. At first, he was totally thrown off, then it hit him. The device wasn't answering him at all, it was responding to something nearby. Without a second thought, Rate snatched his gear, bolted outside, and locked in his potions and flashbangs for instant action. Ready for a fight or a handshake, he charged toward the signal, hellbent on finding whoever was throwing magic around. Pushing deeper into the forest, Rate kept the magic detector blazing, chasing the signal as he clutched a flashbang in his free hand. Knowing exactly where he needed to go, he snapped his course into place, hit the gas, and blasted over the fallen logs without once easing up. As he crept closer, he vanished into the shadows, quieting himself completely as he slipped through the trees. A chilling warning cry tore through the air, and he realized civilians were close and they were in serious danger. Sensing the threat was already breathing down his neck, Rate leapt forward like a missile, ready to smash the problem at its source. Raid crashed into a clearing and found a young girl refusing to leave her injured father behind, even as danger loomed close and ready to strike. Ducking through the thick foliage, he spotted a massive wolf, eyes blazing, jaws ripped open like a monster charging in, stalking the helpless group that stood no chance. The father froze in place, trembling hard, while his daughter threw herself in front of him, fear blazing in her eyes as the monster surged closer. Towering over them, the beast raised to strike, while Raid was already cooking up his move to stop it. From the shadows of the trees, a bear launches its brutal attack, tearing into 3 travelers on a forest path. Up close, you see the man bleeding hard as the girl drops to her knees helpless, and the knight itself fights to shield them, even as his wounded shoulder drags him down. A few seconds later, the bear lets out a savage roar and rockets forward, claws crashing down as the wounded knight can barely keep his ground. He spots death closing in, slinks out of hiding with a burst of speed, then snaps the distance shut like he planned it all along. His pinpoint strike drives straight through the beast, halting it in its tracks and sealing the survivor's rescue. Rate slams the switch, fires up a tiny device, and boom, an eye-blinding explosion detonates, knocking the charging bear to a dead stop mid-attack. Shock ripples across the battlefield as flames and thick smoke swallow the beast's claws, and the wounded knight braces himself against the blast. As the light dies out, Rate keeps driving forward, pinning that monster in place so it can't slip away and turning the whole fight into his trap. He launches poisoned needles that punch into the bear's flesh, and the deadly toxin spreads fast beneath that thick, armored hide. Even with the damage staring back at him, the higher-ranked monster snaps into a brutal counterattack, and it's crystal clear this fight isn't anywhere near finished. He rips through a tactic shift and triggers Metamorphosis, remaking his weapon so it can absolutely wreck the towering bear. He boosts the poison into a lethal dose, then fires sharpened shots with deadly precision, hitting the creature's weak spots hidden under its hide. The enhanced strike rips straight through flesh, yanking the monster back in raw, visible agony as dark fluid erupts everywhere. Rate locks in, plants himself between the survivors and the beast, and takes command of the battlefield without a single second of hesitation. A final, spiraling strike plows straight into the bear's core, smashing through its last bit of resistance and forcing it down into total collapse. Raid slips past the bear's wild sweeping claws, then snaps in with a lightning-fast slash, ripping through fur as the enraged beast whirls like a storm. The monster strikes back with bone-crushing power, but Rate digs in hard, bracing himself as he realizes the fight is almost over. He readies a final arrow, stacked in layered toxins built to slip past resistance and rip the creature's internal systems apart. With the bow yanked to full tension, Rate fires the arrow straight into the bear's exposed body. Venom blasts through the beast, violent eruptions bursting outward as its final collapse closes in fast. The poison bear lurches and staggers, its steps dragging as Rate watches in cool calm, sure those layered toxins are finally taking hold. Moments later, that massive body lunges forward and face plants into the ground right in front of him, slamming down with zero mercy. Paralysis races through the creature's nerves, numbing every ounce of pain and shutting off awareness, while the last of the venom quietly ravages its organs from the inside. As the dust finally settles, the stunned knight can't even process it, how that monster dropped so suddenly. Raita stands over the corpse, voice low as he accepts the kill, while the terrified survivors lock eyes on him, stunned they just witnessed it. With the bear finally down, Rate stares at the knight still on his feet and realizes the beast's toxin didn't kill fast, it dragged its damage out. Then he spots the older man soaked in blood from deep chest wounds, and he knows the bleeding will kill him before anything else. Right as the rat tries to slip away, the knight lurches forward and slams into his path, despite the exhaustion screaming from his bones. The young woman watches in shaking silence as tension snaps between the armed knight and the calm assassin. With zero mercy, the Rate snarls that if they refuse to help, the wounded man will be blamed. The knight fired off questions to Rate, and fury and suspicion surged as he stared at the calm assassin right in front of him. But as he darts a look back at the dying elder and the frightened young woman kneeling there, doubt slams into him. Rate pulls out a tiny medicine bottle, hands it over without a second thought, and vows he'll try to save the wounded man. Still wary, the knight scrutinizes the container inch by inch, measuring whether he can trust it, or if he has to gamble everything. To prove he's legit, Rate lets him pick a bottle, then wipes every doubt clean with calm, no-nonsense confidence. To remove suspicion, Rate grabs the chosen bottle and drinks from it himself, leaving zero doubt that he trusts the medicine's safety. The knight, satisfied with the gesture, thrusts the container into his hands, yet you can still see caution burning behind that hardened stare. The young woman drops to her knees beside her wounded father and slowly pours the medicine into his mouth, coaxing every last drop in. Moments later, raw energy floods his battered body, snapping torn flesh shut and stitching the damage back together. Under those stunned stares, the deadly wounds snapped shut, and the man who was moments from death started breathing steady and alive again. The knight and his daughter gawk in disbelief as the old man's wounds slam shut completely, far beyond anything they ever thought regular medicine could do. Ray quietly clocks their reaction, realizing that even a measly potion here somehow looks unreal. No pride left, he slides over another bottle and confesses that the poison in his body is still clinging to him from that night. With a quick pause, the knight finally agrees, downs the drink, and puts his trust in the assassin's earlier move. Strength seeps back into him, and he silently pays his respect as the Rate stays cold and unmoved. The knight snaps into action, demanding to know what's left of the poison because every breath he takes is shaky, and he can't shake the fear that his earlier suspicion might be right. After checking his condition, he questioned every symptom and tracked how far the paralysis had spread. He tells her the toxin will creep to the heart soon, and even though the numbness in the knight's limbs says it hasn't gone full fatal yet, it's still spreading. Raid snaps to action, ordering immediate treatment, then tells them to haul the old man while he races off to make the antidote somewhere else. He guides them to his house and swings the door open as they trail behind him, stepping carefully like they're afraid of what's inside. In the quiet little house, Rattler lines up his tools, tells them to hang tight, and then dives straight into mixing the antidote. The knight challenges his skill and Rate just stays cool, saying he can handle whatever's needed, even if he isn't the true specialist. Toei's suspicious, so he lets them watch the whole thing and then tells them, "Give me a bit of time, I'll finish it fast." Meanwhile, the injured elder lies on the bed, breath hanging on by a thread, weak but steady. Moments later, Rape shows up with the finished antidote, fresh, ready, and itching to be injected into the treatment. The knight grimaces as numbness crawls up his arm, then, still steady, calmly gauges how bad it's getting and keeps right on with his preparations. Watching the paralysis creep in so slowly, the Rate decides there's still time left, plenty of it, before it turns deadly. He rips through the herbs one by one, and when he spots how lousy they are, a grim realization hits. Making a real antidote from this is going to be brutal. He carefully blends every ingredient, then leans on pure technique and tight, controlled magic to forge the potion stronger than ever. Finally, he slams the last of the brew into place, sets the bowls down in front of them, and lets the knight begin, ready for them to drink. Determined to prove the antidote won't harm anyone, the knight steps up first and tastes it himself while his daughter clings to him, watching in terrified silence. He downs the whole mixture in one fierce gulp, then steadies himself as the liquid floods through his body. A sudden jolt rockets through his veins, and the potion erupts, energy blasting outward from his hand. He freezes, eyes locked on his palm, trying to figure out if this strange effect screams danger or whispers you're healing. In the blink of an eye, that numbness evaporates, and he's left staring in shock as the antidote works instantly. Rate shouts at them to hand over the antidote to the old man, now, because he took in way more poison than anyone realizes during that fight. The young woman steadies her father with all her strength, then lifts the bowl to his lips as the knight looms in close watch. After the drink, the elder's face loosens, the last traces of poison burn off, and his strength steadies one heartbeat at a time. Rates checks them both, confirms the wounds and the poison are being handled, and tells them to let the man sleep it off until he wakes on his own. Once the crisis finally calms down, he folds his arms and starts grilling them, who they are and why they're here. After a quick flash of eye contact, the young woman makes the call, no more pretending, they'll finally show who they really are. Raid lets them talk, staying stone calm as he waits, ready to hear why they're here. The knight straight up introduces himself as Gold of the Imperial Guard, then drops the bombshell. He's pledged his loyalty to the Macis kingdom. The woman bursts out her name, Lumia Macis, and then drops the bomb. The injured guy is King Ria's Macis. Hearing that, Rate quietly rethinks everything and realizes he just stepped into royal business. Before the rate even starts, Lumia blasts out overwhelming power, and it slams him into rethinking his next calculated move. Lumia calmly stepped forward and introduced herself, daughter of King Laias, the ruler of the mighty Mythas dynasty. Then Raida nodded and accepted their terms, saying his name like it was nothing, while the crushing secrecy behind it hung heavy in the air. She sat on the edge of her seat, waiting for the king to finally wake, doubting what Raid would say next and wondering what he was really planning. Raid watched her like a hawk, reading every flicker of desperation, then weighed just how far he dared to pull himself into this. Instead of answering, he tossed out the idea of a meal, stalling the choice that could have flipped destinies. Morning calm wrapped around him as he grilled skewers, and the food he'd stored stayed fresh and ready for anyone who needed it. Lumia's eyes went huge because I couldn't believe it. He was grilling some mystery monster on the spot, no hesitation at all. Fresh antidote potions sat nearby, easing their nerves, yet the fear of poison still hung in the air, never fully said aloud. Surprised by what she saw, Lumia lit up and praised his ingenuity, because in the end, she realized that simple survival skills can hit harder than anything. Raid braced for her to trash the meal, but she surprised him with praise that crushed every condescending expectation. Panic erupted as the knight slammed in, and voices blared that Lumia couldn't trust the so-called Rate's ways. He kneaded the seasonings into the meat with a calm hand while the others spiraled into arguments, totally unmoved by their survival plans getting shut down. He took another bite and the richness of the fat hit perfectly, locking in that crazy balance of flavor in the monster meat. The doubt melted away as the flavor stayed on his tongue, and what once felt weird now totally wowed his battle-tested palate. Still, he thrust the skewer forward, quietly probing if hunger could beat royal pride and bend ancient rules. Goldo's brow crinkled in disbelief. Why were they so unprepared, especially after he'd been tasked with escorting royalty through a deadly journey? As the doubt finally melted away, he took the offer to test the meat, betting his survival on instinct and throwing protocol to the wind. A savage wave of imagination crashed over him, and his hallucinations tangled old romance with the skewered meat clenched in his hands. Reality snapped back as he admitted the flavor was even better than anything the capital's grandest banquets ever served. Excitement surged through him as he barked for identification, sure the mystery meat was treasure, something nobles would pay a fortune for. Rate finally clocked it. Goldo's gluttony wasn't some sudden problem, and Lumia made it crystal clear. Food kept beating his duty every single time. Flashbacks tore the mask off Goldo's noble side. He craved fine delicacies so hard he even broke decorum at royal banquets. Lumia gripped the skewer like she owned the moment, and everyone leaned in as they waited for her to take that first bite. Before she even got a bite, Rate snapped into action and turned scrap and broken parts into a real table, powered by magic. He laid out the conjured setup in silence, then calmly handed her a plate for royal convenience. Lumia froze as the table suddenly appeared, firing questions about where it came from, then Rate just smiled and said, calm as ever, that he built it. She didn't hesitate, she took a bite, chewed slow, and watched her eyes flare wide as warmth and flavor exploded through her. While her thoughts drifted off, the memories and the dreams of calm days by the river surged back, vivid as if they were happening right now. Tears blurred her vision as she ate because that flavor hit her like a warm memory, comfort she hadn't felt in forever. Goldo praised the taste one more time, then refused to take any more. Duty came first as he rationed every last bit to conserve their supplies. With gratitude flooding his heart, Goldo declared his loyalty and eagerly took even more skewers from Rate's generous hand. Even the grandest castle feasts paled in comparison, and everyone was stunned to learn that those plain little frogs somehow delivered real joy. Lumia couldn't shake the thought that the flavor tasted like Gallia frogs, the rare delicacy she'd savored once, ages ago. Rate couldn't make sense of the idea. Gallia frogs demanded skills way beyond what you'd ever need in the forest. Goldo couldn't hold back his curiosity and grilled them about what they were preparing, totally blind to the fact that this chat would unleash shocking revelations later. For days, the royal chef tore his hair out of hundreds of frog dishes. Only one finally tasted good enough to pass. Despite the warnings, Rate didn't blink. He just stared at the poison sacs diagram with terrifying calm, locked in like he couldn't be shaken. With the cooked frog in his hands, he nonchalantly asked whether it matched the infamous Gallia species description. Goldo snapped into panic at the sight while Lumia threw her hands to her mouth, because the frog was perfect and somehow not one single sac was torn open. Sudden knocking shattered the silence. Rage tightened around Rate's grip as he clutched his knife, wondering who in their right mind would come to a hut like this. Lumia went stone still as Goldo surged forward, throwing himself in front of her to block any danger. They all whispered about Razel's return, but the doubt was hanging in every cautious look they shared. A familiar voice blared from the other side of the door, and the missing knight announced himself with pure confidence. With sword still up, Goldo yanked the door open and Razel slipped back inside. Warm greetings rolled in as Rachel's smile lit up Lumia's face, and you could feel the relief pouring out, because even after they got separated, Lumia was finally safe and unhurt. Razel's call for help got nothing back, no answer at all, so his search dragged him straight here. Suspicion shot up fast because the moment doubts sparked, it didn't make sense why a lowly commoner would be anywhere near royal blood. Dead frogs, scattered herbs, and strange supplies piled up all around, making this eerie shelter feel like a secret begging to be uncovered. Goldo tossed it out like it was Rate's place, and Rachel just froze, because he'd never even heard that name. Even though they called Rate a commoner, the way they stood there, calm, steady, unshakable, blew apart everything their noble guest thought they knew. Lumia calmly told them exactly how she survived, and she blamed her own choices, leaving everyone else scratching their heads at how that even made sense. She confirmed it right there, telling him how her Rate crushed the monster and stitched up every wound it left behind. Inside yet another room, the king crumpled unconscious, because Raid himself had slipped in the antidote right on time. Rachel didn't buy it for a second. She kept staring at the timing, convinced Rate's perfect arrival and that rare medicine in his hands were way too convenient to be coincidence. With panic climbing fast, Razel barked for a retreat, shouting that deception was everywhere, while Rate watched, silent as a blade. Lumia stood her ground, defending Rate with fierce certainty, and swore that his home was the safest refuge in a region overrun by monsters. No one answered right away. Silence snapped tight, and Rate's fingers tightened around something as his eyes slid away. He made it crystal clear. If malice was real, not a single door would stay unlocked, and none of the guards would walk away unhurt. Before anyone could even catch their breath, accusations exploded, defensive shouting followed, and every claim painted the princess as the enemy. Without even raising his voice, Rate told them, quiet as a knife, that if anyone dared to provoke him, nobody there would be able to stop him. And he calmly cleared everything up. This wasn't hesitation at all. He stayed still because he had zero intention of hurting anyone. Rachel's body lit up with deadly weak spots in Rate's vision, and it showed just how exposed he really was. Even Goldo, the strongest of them all, could get dropped in seconds the moment things turned that bad. But the truth hurt worse than any insult. Those blunt words pushed Razel's pride to the absolute edge of boiling over. Lumia burst in with unstoppable force, snuffing out the chaos as she fiercely defended the man who'd saved all their lives. Even though Razel fought back with protests, Lumia's voice stayed rock solid. Her command cut him off cold, leaving zero room to argue. A deep, heavy sigh spilled out, and with that stern command, the whole weight of leadership settled on her shoulders like a silent doom. Lumia didn't blink. She snapped a chilling order to Goldo, warning that any next defiance would end with Razel's execution. The memories of past executions and those merciless nights crushed him, until panic drove him to his knees, begging for forgiveness. Rate just watched in silence, and then it hit him. Lumia's authority wasn't just for show. Her presence could actually break even the fiercest warriors and force them to submit. Razel's bitterness still burned on his face, even after the tension finally cooled and no one dared raise more objections. Hoping for a real breakthrough, Raid leaned in and asked Lumia's permission to act. Because he knew the truth couldn't be guessed, it had to be earned face to face. Shock ripped through the crowd the moment his proposal landed. A duel right then, right there, so everything could be settled by direct confrontation. Clarity hit fast, no rules, no limits left to hide behind. Now it was pure strength and stubborn resolve that would decide what happened next. Razel shot back with confidence, sword held high, because he felt Raid's earlier brag about being superior had finally crossed the line. Underestimating fair combat, Raid didn't charge like a warrior. He launched his strike like a trained assassin. Lumia snapped her head toward him, stunned by how seriously and straight to the point the young man was. Raid challenged Razel to a duel on the spot, and his insanely bold move blindsided Lumia completely. He made it crystal clear this mock battle wasn't for show, it was the real test to see Razel's fighting skill up close. Lumia snapped back to her royal duty, panicking that those Raid's training drills couldn't just steamroll her proper nightly education protocol. Even though she hesitated, she saw Razel's raw strength and let the rape happen to settle everything peacefully. Razel's allies snapped at Raid not to underestimate him, bragging up his elite ranking and warning that his skill hits like steel. With a grin full of confidence, Raid snapped up the challenge and strode into the open field where their duel was about to ignite. Razel laid down the rules, firing off one last question about what was off-limits. Then Raid grinned and gave him total freedom to fight however he wanted. To make sure everyone stayed safe, he spilled the potion he'd brought. Then the real shock hit. The race he expected so little from had come loaded with clever, unexpected preparations for injury. Even though it was just a level -1 potion, the whole group nearly lost it, seeing him toss it around like it was nothing. Suspicion slammed into them as they realized his potions were worth way more than anything ordinary people could ever reach. People started whispering that he might have been the royal court's personal doctor, because the antidote he brewed hit with shockingly powerful results. While everyone argued about his past, Wraith quietly wondered whether those potions really mattered this much. In this world's potion trade, makers got labeled as physicians, but back in VLO, everyone called them alchemists. Even though it's labeled rare, you can still craft a basic level 1 potion as long as you've got level 10 alchemy proficiency. Grinding up crafting level -0 potions for 3 straight days turbocharged alchemy in VLOL, slingshotting it to level 10. People started whispering about his isolated mountain life, convinced he'd fled some lost kingdom and vanished into the wilderness. He stayed ice calm, convinced their wild guesses were nothing compared to the real truth of where he came from. To dodge any more suspicion, he slammed the brakes on the questions and made it crystal clear his past wasn't up for discussion. He didn't waste a second. He struck his stance like a pro and announced, loud and sure, that the mock battle was about to kick off. Razel lifted his sword with pure suspicion, staring at the stranger like, "How am I supposed to trust you when you've buried your entire past?" Rate shot him a reminder. Once the fighting starts, who someone really is shows up louder than any words ever could. The moment the duel kicked off, the referee blew the signal and roared, "Begin." Both fighters squared up, eyes locked, every muscle taut, holding their breath as they waited for the first move. Suddenly, Rate yanked a glowing item from his coat, and Razel froze in shock at the sight of it. A flash of light exploded the moment Ray activated the mysterious artifact. No hesitation at all. Razel staggered, battered by a blinding rush of light, his eyes screaming as his sight started to smear into blur. As his opponent floundered, Rate surged in fast, and the crowd nearby gasped in shock. Even with her vision crippled, Rachel snapped into action, slamming her blade into the fight with razor-precise instincts forged from years of relentless night training. Even with his vision wiped out, he carved the air with a devastating slash, forcing a retreat like pure, unmatched power. Rachel felt the room shift around him on pure instinct, then moved like a master, fighting his way through even without sight. Landing a critical blow would have been easy, but that's not what he's aiming for. He didn't just chase victory, he turned it into a spotlight, showing everyone the brutal gap in skill. Reinforcement magic surged through him, turbocharging his body with raw power as he bolted forward without a single doubt. Steel screamed as blades collided in a brutal rhythm, every strike landing like a perfectly aimed verdict. Razor blade met slick Rachel's with a violent clash, equal force, but you could tell the assassin's momentum was the one driving it. He didn't hesitate for a heartbeat, he shifted his stance, slipped behind Rachel mid-swing, and somehow hit with ghost stealth accuracy that defied every rule. A sudden enchantment snapped onto Raid's dagger, its glow turning ominous as raw magical energy clawed lines across the steel. Rachel's weapon splintered into nothing, fully caught off guard as Rate's technique morphed out of nowhere and slammed him with brutal pressure. Rate smirked, then launched forward in a blur. Rachel stood there, frozen in defeat, not because Rate overpowered him, but because he outplayed him with pure strategy and iron control. A monstrous spirit tore into the scene, blasting them with brutal pressure as Rate and Rachel readied themselves to team up and fight. Raid sprinted straight at the enemy, his blade blazing with enchanted fury, while Rachel clenched down and activated a wooden catalyst with grim focus. Wide-eyed, Rays screamed in terror as the Rates unleashed their strike, slicing through reality like divine judgment. Time seemed to freeze the instant the final blow hit. Rachel realized it a split second too late because the match was already decided. Standing calm as stone, Raid laid out just how deadly that magic was, then yanked the illusion away before Rachel could even fully sink into what he'd lost. Luckily, the racial stats stayed within reach. If he used bestowal magic now, it wouldn't wreck Rate's body too badly. Rachel crumpled to his knees, staring at his shattered weapon in total shock, completely unable to wrap his head around what just happened. Raid didn't even flinch. He calmly admitted he'd been using transformation magic, and then admitted his sword training was barely above beginner level. A nearby soldier gushed about Raid's raw power, then side-eyed the blade, demanding why such a weak-looking sword could hit this hard. Red-faced and shaken by the truth, Raid realized the sword was a rare imperial prize, pushed to him through a top-level promotion. Rate knelt in stunned silence, scooping up the shattered pieces one by one, promising to fix the damage their battle had left behind. Razzle suddenly snatched for the sword and Rate yelped in alarm. He reacted on pure instinct, fast as lightning. Rage and frustration surged through Razzle as he gripped the shattered pieces tight, refusing to call it quits or accept any apology. As he paced away, he drowned out the commands snapping behind him, refusing to confront the shame surging inside his chest. A noble woman snapped at him, stern and unyielding, reminding him that knights swallow defeat with dignity, no excuses, no bitter rage. After that crushing defeat, Rachel's disrespectful Rate got slammed. His night turned into a nightmare as senior officials tore into him with harsh condemnation. Princess Lumia didn't even pause. She dropped into a deep bow and took full blame for Rachel's behavior in front of everyone. Fury erupted between the commanders, some screamed for justice, while others snapped that the princess must not embarrass herself by showing her face in public. Cold judgment slammed down and the execution was declared inevitable, because defying orders and shaming the Knights Association not once but again and again was unforgivable. Even with the title on her shoulders, Lumia froze for a moment, still young and still tethered by loyalty and every shared memory she had with Rachel. Rule 3 demanded an execution, and the Knight Code left zero space for mercy. The princess finally gave in, and in that instant everyone knew it. Death was the only sentence the Empire's law and bloodline would ever allow. Rate stepped forward calm as ever and pressed the question, was this final punishment really necessary right here, right now? As traditions clung on, Rate finally saw it. These brutal rules and customs weren't just old, they were painfully outdated. Even without any obligation, Raku decided to step in, because if they could keep things diplomatic, everyone would come out better and they'd dodge the pointless bloodshed happening right now. By taking the racial side, a strategic opening suddenly lit up. Now the Rate could flex for political leverage. Goldo and Razel charged up to Rate and demanded answers. How could he snap to violence so fast? While they worried, the Rate snapped coldly back. There was no room for compromise when it came to assassination. Goldo snapped that the fallout didn't stop with one person. It reached into the Imperial Knight's tangled politics and forced him to own the damage. With pure conviction blasting from his voice, Goldo roared that protecting the royal dignity was their mission. No exceptions, no bending their rigid codes. Rate only showed Lumia, then he saw the moment that screamed, "Keep it secret and nobody pays the price." Lumia swore they'd keep it buried, gripping that vow tight as she backed Rate's plan to smother the whole incident in silence. After a tense pause, Goldo finally let out a long breath and pitched it like a deal. Bind Rate and Rachel's fate together. Goldo laid out the Knight's clause: if a mission needed the criminal's skills, the punishment could be pushed back. Then Rate clocked it: no matter how long the mission dragged on, the execution would stay locked in limbo forever. Goldo finally nodded and took charge of the whole setup himself, locking in full control over the Rates under his own authority. Racel nodded and signed on, swearing he'd obey every single condition Goldo just laid down. He bowed with deep respect, knowing this sudden mercy had completely rewritten the road his fate was taking. Goldo barked one last warning at him: redeem yourself or face swift, deadly consequences. Once he got that final say, he could rip away the trust. Then Rachel's execution would hit without hesitation or any chance to appeal. What started as a clean duel spiraled fast, until one fighter seized control and decided the fate of another man's life. Lumia rushed to the wounded man's side, while Rate quietly dragged in a bucket of water. Rage-slow days kept rolling as water and work continued outside. Rachel jumped in to help chop wood, while Ra T stood watch over the patient's condition in grim silence. While Lumia scrubbed the man's face clean, Rate spotted the discomfort on him and immediately stared at the bed like it was the real problem. Curious, Lumia followed his stare and pressed the mattress, then stopped, baffled by how it was built and how rock-hard it felt. Even though the house was nice and put together, that brutally firm mattress instantly set off alarm bells in our heads. Lumia burst into praise, soaking in the house's graceful interior and admiring every piece of carefully chosen, luxurious furniture. Rage shoved a confiscated blade into the light and swore it was about to be remade into a comfier bed. Even though she hated it, Rachel clenched her teeth, swallowed her anger, and obeyed Lumia, surrendering the weapon and hiding her fury behind a calm mask. As they stepped inside, Lumia immediately guessed it was for metalwork, only to realize, way too late, it was a mattress. Raid gave a vague answer and Lumia snapped, asking whether he'd actually crossed the line without royal permission. He finally laid out his intentions. This construction wasn't torture at all, it was just his way of making bedding that actually worked. Transformation circles snapped to life, twisting Lumia's coils into razor-sharp springs, leaving her staring in stunned awe at every wild second. Still unsure, he clenched his resolve and copied the mattress springs, while old crafting memories from a far-off past flooded his mind. To cover for what was missing, he smashed iron sand and whatever scraps he could gather together, then forged it all into one through wild magic techniques. Racel went rigid in shock at the sight of his repurposed sword as Goldo barked for more timber. Rates ripped through the setup, slamming down thick mats as alchemy and magic surged into the ground to forge the base. He wove the sword parts into the tatami, stitching each layer with a blazing thread as he murmured command after command. The transformation ended, and that plain weapon didn't just change. It got reborn as a lavish, alchemically upgraded cushion that pushed back with a bouncy, springy bite. Curious, Lumia scrambled onto the mattress, startled by how it bucked under her, then got sucked further into its snapping recoil. Oil blasted upward and she rocketed into the air, then slammed back down as the mattress jerked and bucked, leaving her gasping and completely overwhelmed by the impact. Lumia shoved her hands into the cushion and just stared, stunned by how impossibly soft it was, way beyond what any royal comfort could ever promise. Stunned by how flexible it was, she praised the rate, then watched him quietly figure out the mattress's money-making power before he hesitated. Lumia's reaction lit a spark in Ray's head, so he grabbed the plan and decided to remake every single bed, certain he had plenty of free time. With urgency blazing in her stride, Lumia burst outside, clutching the fabric tight, and a spark of curiosity lit up her whole mind. She couldn't help herself, she sprang back onto the bed, and it instantly blasted her up into the air like a cannon. Momentum slammed into her and she toppled across the mattress, twisting and flailing like she couldn't catch a single breath. Breathing hard and burning with heat, she finally crumpled onto the cushion, swallowed by its plush softness as the non-stop bouncing kept rocking her world. Raid just stared, totally unimpressed, while Lumia's cheeks flared red as she panicked and threw a pillow in sheer embarrassment. She fought to act normal, clutched the fluffy cushion to her chest, and prayed it would hide her face. She had no fight left. She collapsed into comfort, clutched the pillow again, and sank into that sweet, peaceful obsession. She clutched the cushion so tight she could barely breathe, then let the comfort crash over her like a warm wave. Later, as she brushed her hair, she snapped her gaze upward, startled by a sudden knock and the eerie presence in the room. Rate clocked her nervous face and asked, in a calm voice, if what she'd asked for was too hard. Shocked by her own nerve, she demanded, could the bed come back to her? Relief flooded her as his reaction landed, so she clutched her pillow tight. Then her eyes widened when he accepted it without a fight. Approval came fast, and he promised, if you bring the materials next time, I'll crank out more beds. Tears of joy shimmered in her eyes as she clutched the cushion to her chest and thanked him from the bottom of her heart. Elsewhere, chaos erupted. Rassel tore his hair over his missing sword while Rate soaked up the glory of his win. Dawn broke and frantic screams tore through the forest, driving Rate straight toward a nearby cabin. Relief crashed across his face as he finally realized the alchemist's treatment had worked. Lee cracked open his eyes, fully awake at last, and sat upright beside Lumia like the strength had finally returned. Raid pushed back on the older man's answer, but Lias waved off the worry with a calm, polite smile. Lias shrugged at the lack of formality among adventurers, but he never once judged them for something that didn't matter. Inside the cabin, Lumia lay in still silence while Lias quietly studied every detail, sizing up the whole situation like it might explode any second. With suspicion blazing, Liar straight up grilled him, asking his rate just to get to the bottom of who he really was. Then Raid's vague answer stalled the moment and Lies finally felt it. Something in the story still didn't quite fit. Ray traced the magic lamp's glow and instantly knew that perfect light wasn't something any regular doctor could just get their hands on. Lias pressed a hand to his chest and told him straight up, this wound was too brutal for some basic healing potion to fix. A perfect recovery and boom, everyone knew the confirm rate had cracked open a potion past level 1, something wildly rare and way stronger than anything most people could touch. Lias and Lumia's eyes went wide as Rate casually let slip that he brewed the potion himself. Lias erupted into laughter, stunned beyond words that he'd managed to craft a top-tier potion all by himself. He leaned in, grinning at Rate, daring him to prove his skill by whipping up a level 2 potion again. But before he even answered, Raid shot back his demand, give him something in return, an explanation for why the king was here, alone like this in the middle of nowhere. Tension snapped higher as the liars grilled the negotiators about their audacity, especially when they dared to bargain face-to-face with someone of royal blood. Rate didn't even pause, he snapped out his plan and made it crystal clear. He treated everyone as equals. The king agreed, then Lias slammed down one rule. No one answers until the advanced potion is recreated. Lias finally admitted his condition was spiraling downhill, and he said the only thing that could truly save him now was an advanced potion made by Maker. Herbs slammed onto the counter in messy piles as Ray punched in, ready to start brewing his potion. No hesitation at all. He declared the key ingredient wasn't rare at all, just ordinary magigrass pulled straight from the nearby fields. With laser focus, his hands crushed the ingredients, stirred them together, and poured everything in the exact order, right on the beat. He watched with sharp focus, then gave a quick nod of approval, blown away by how steady and practiced every move looked. Rage boiled in his chest as those steady hands churned that thick mixture, simmering it down into its final, perfectly refined form. Steam curled up slow and steady as the liquid churned, then, bam, the red turned vivid, proving the potions were a total success. His eyes went wide as he poured it into the bottles, then, cool as ice, he presented the finished results like a man who'd already won. Curious about what it would do, Lias demanded a potion test, despite there not being a single visible injury on him. Out of nowhere, he ripped his own shoulder open with a vicious slash, and the whole crowd froze in stunned silence. Gasp after gasp ricocheted through the room as Laius stood her ground, completely unbothered by everyone's frantic worry. Potions soaked his wounded hand, and as their bright magic pulsed, the ripped flesh slowly knit back together. Stunned by how fully he healed, he admitted Rate's work was real, and it worked without a doubt. He knew testing that potion on other people would be reckless, so he threw caution aside and gambled his own life to prove it was real. Health surged back, confidence hit full power, and Lays nodded, ready to finally spill his story, trusting Rate's skill with zero hesitation. Raid nodded to secrecy as Lias barked that he must never spill their conversation to a single soul. With his hands clenched tight, Lias finally blurted the terrifying truth. His visit was tied directly to a planned assassination. Raid leaned in, eyes locked on Lias as he shouted that the prince's guards were wiped out by Sadark's transfer magic. Lumia snapped the truth into focus and realized those victims were yanked straight into a monster's path with zero warning. Even though Lias tried to brace for the attack, he reacted a heartbeat too late, and the hit landed hard, leaving him seriously injured. Raid tore apart the assassination and realized the enemy used transfer magic to slip right past the usual defenses. Alone, transfer magic was harmless, but once someone planted traps at the exact arrival spot, it turned deadly in an instant. Goldo hit one knee, crushed by guilt, blaming himself for not shielding Laius during the ambush. Laius carefully lifted Goldo's head and told him straight, no knight on any battlefield could have stopped what happened in that moment. Even after Goldo denied it, Laius snapped back that only he held the line and kept him safe until the threat finally faded. Leia's guessed another name, but Goldo slammed his head side to side, certain Rachel wasn't the one behind it. Goldo pointed with absolute confidence and announced that Raid was the one who stepped in during the chaos and saved everyone. No hesitation, Raid blurted out the truth. He'd poisoned the item, and now it was turned against the very person it was meant to hit. Laius demanded answers about where it all came from, and learning Rate revealed he brewed the poison himself, using raw natural ingredients and razor-precise methods. Even with elite racial swordsmanship in his hands, he still got beaten in the end by those clever, subtle fighters who fought with ruthless tactics. Witnesses swore the Rate used a wild, unorthodox move to shatter Rachel's blade during their face-off. Laius didn't waste time obsessing over sword skills. He shifted gears, his training stretched out longer, and then an unexpected offer hit like a curveball. Curious as hell, Raid demanded a clear answer about the proposal, and Laius begged for help getting back to his castle. The dense forest screamed danger at every turn, but Laius's trusted Rate's skill would carve them a safe path back home. Doubt crashed in. Raid couldn't stop wondering if the traitor who set up that ambush would actually welcome Laius back. 8 seconds of silence hit, and their narrowed eyes screamed doubt as reflection and realization crashed over everyone. Laius calmly laid it out. Sadark's was likely getting executed, neatly framed as the traitor so the real culprit could walk free. Rate stared at the person's suspicious vibe and wondered how anyone like that had slipped into the prince's elite personal guard. Swamped by regret, Laius suddenly snapped. He'd personally appointed Sadark's and he couldn't point to a single real reason. Everyone started connecting the dots fast, and when Rate pressed for details about Sadark's past, suspicions swelled like a storm. Suspicious deaths piled up around him, satire spread like a spark, and even the rumors about food being tampered with sent shockwaves of fear through everyone near him. Rate, calm but clearly thinking, wondered if those crimes deserved swift, unquestioned execution, right then and there. Even though Laius saw the danger clear as day, he still handed Sadark the kitchen duty, and when it was over he forgave him fast with zero consequences. He stared him down in silence, and each bad leadership choice turned his annoyance into a growing, burning frustration. With more pressure, Laius finally admitted that not a single soul said a word, no dissent, not even the prime minister who usually wouldn't shut up. Raid calmly snapped that Sadark's dangerously absurd vibe was the kind people couldn't help but hate. Sweat dripped down Laia's face as she finally admitted her sad arc was a nuisance, one everyone hated and one that clearly couldn't be trusted. Darkness surged in like a wave. Sadark's presence crushed the room, voices died to nuisance echoes, and sinister energy burst out of the shadows. Right in the middle of the clash, Sadark tore through as a monstrous blur, Then a knight clocked his pattern and snapped into motion on pure instinct. Later, Lias jolted awake, stunned that he'd actually made it, while Lumia lit up beside him, and Raid just stood there, watching everything. Lumia made it crystal clear. His survival wasn't some wish come true, it was pure power from a potion that hauled him back from the brink. She confessed that Rate tapped a rare level -1 healing potion to bring her father back to life. Lias slowly turned her gaze and finally realized the truth. This young man had really saved her. Suspicion crept into him, and though Leah felt grateful, she couldn't shake the unease, because her questions were peeling back the physician's mask, revealing his true nature. Raid clocked the enemy's mind control magic the moment it hit, then tore into it, scanning for cracks in its structure. The twisted creature staggered in, eyes wide with warped memories, and Rate's quiet analysis shattered the control threads before they could hold. Magic surged as Rate snapped into a swift counterattack, smashing the puppet's core with deadly precision. Revealing the magic tool MK1, Rate demanded answers as he doubted their plan. Mental control wouldn't work on both of them. Death surged from his armor as power erupted, and Raid's calm, deadly voice sliced the air. Don't underestimate me. Raid's defense blasted the enemy's spell apart with a violent crack, sending shards flying across the raging battlefield. Raid calmly adjusted his scarf, shrugged off the attack like it was nothing, and snapped it down with cold, precise contempt miles away. Magical lanterns suddenly flickered out as a mystery watcher realized the spell had been wiped clean, without warning. Sadarks, the warlock, stood his ground and swore he'd carry out Mars's vision, no matter the setbacks or the rising interference trying to stop him. In that far-off city, civilians shot wary glances to the symbol overhead, like a silent shadow of war had just come back to haunt them. A fierce question burst into the air, and it hit Sadark's hatred like a spark. The elder snapped back fast, his face tight, eyes wary like trouble was already closing in. Truth burst into the open, and tension snapped tight. Everyone squirmed with nerves while the elder scrambled to explain himself. Shock ripped through him when he realized Sadark's brutality hadn't left him alone. Everybody in the castle backed the warlock. Confusion crushed in on him. Politics had turned into a twisted web, and alliances snapped into place against him without a heads-up or a single warning. King Lias fired back to defend his choices, calling it pure frugality, but even noble intentions only stirred a dangerous storm of political opposition under the surface. Underneath it all, everything finally clicked. Brainwashing magic had quietly slipped into every mind, and it was still inside. A mind manipulation side Rate gets explained, and these magic forces make people obey, bending their will so they carry out every command with zero resistance. The virtual world spilled the truth. Magic had a hard limit, and only villains got to touch it while players were left out in the cold. Lias fought the control puzzle, but magic slapped hard limits around him, so he challenged the warlock's weird choices. Strong minds don't bend, so royalty fought that magic, and exile was the choice because control never worked on him. Realization hit him the second the explanation ended, and once the danger clicked, the knight snapped into action with pure, urgent urgency. Lucy watched Lee panic, because if they didn't stop it, mind control would swallow his entire kingdom and leave nothing standing. Desperation kept clawing at them because nobody had any way to stop Sadark's magic, until one tiny, shocking hope finally surfaced out of nowhere. Rate spoke with total confidence, laying out a solution so sharp it left Lias with only one choice: act. Cutting down the caster would blow the whole spell apart, and wiping out the Sadarks would rip everyone free from mental domination. Killing the Sadarks wouldn't be easy, so they weighed every option, even bending over complicated plans just to pull it off quietly. Thick, impenetrable defenses ringed the royal palace, turning any attempt to sneak inside into a death sentence for stealth. One wrong move and alarms would explode. Doubt crept in, yet logic hit hard. If one manipulator slipped through, then others would figure out how to break in too. Only a true master assassin could take down the Sadarks, but under these conditions, it felt like you couldn't even get close. Without a second thought, Rate snapped into action. He had the perfect connections, even with a killer assassin. Lias bragged that his palace had swallowed every assassin and intruder alive. Rogues, sorcerers, whoever came, yet they all still got wiped out. Still unshaken, he lifted 3 fingers and calmly demanded what, by modern magical rules, even makes a fortress truly impregnable. He laid out the trio of supreme barriers: space disruption, magic disruption, and that stubborn, indestructible wall, woven together into one unstoppable force. Layer after layer locked them in place, and Reito warned that if anyone tried to break through, even the best magic would still fail to penetrate, like destruction itself couldn't get in. Lias hesitated and finally admitted his defenses didn't even fall under a mythical classification, because the rate was really a code for infiltration, and the odds of success were way higher than anyone had expected. He unveiled the immovable barrier as his last line of defense, sealing the fortress in unbreakable protection. Rate peppered him with questions about backup defenses, and Lias admitted there wasn't a single magical shield on the windows. He figured the distance was doing the real protection. Even with Lias warning him, Rat stayed cool and sized up the danger, saying assassinations always come down to one thing: whether the payout is worth it. Hands locked together, Lias stared at the assassin's chances, praying that someone like that actually existed, because he needed that kind of help. They called it a vow: earn the rate, chase the success, or die trying. Miss the mark and you faced instant suicide, because that's the creed of elite assassins taking missions that weren't supposed to be possible. Lias nodded and agreed to any reward it took, then demanded the mysterious assassin meet with her right now. Without a single pause, Rate slapped his palm down and lit up a glowing rune. Then the room started changing, like it was getting ready for something nobody could have predicted. With a sharp snap of his fingers, massive magic circles flared to life, peeling back hidden layers of enchantment and summoning gear from another dimension. Out of nowhere, the weapons chambers materialized. Rate exposed his real face, both a famous doctor and a professional assassin. Lias gasped as the mouse creature tore into action, shaping magic tools MK1 and MK2, then scurried ahead like ruthless tactical support units. The moment the rate got confirmed, the shock hit hard. Turns out he wasn't just the doctor, he was also the hired assassin. As MK1 and MK2 put on a playful show of their functions, Lias clocked exactly how ready they were to slip into covert support mode. Assassins leaned on poison like a secret weapon, and their medical know-how let them slip toxins into the conversation without anyone noticing. Lias shot up in alarm, convinced the target had already brewed antidotes, and built up defenses against the usual poison tricks. Rape proposed a method to mix substances inside the body, whipping up lethal toxicity that poison detectors couldn't catch. Rate leaned in and told him that his poison could seep into the soil in the palace farms, spreading unseen and undetected. By pouring it into the world through magical rain, the tainted soil would spread like a secret, silently, without ever tripping alarms. Lias doubted it could work, but Rate shot back with confidence and grabbed the ready device to prove what it could really do. A magical infusion named ***** surged into the drone tool, supercharging it and fine-tuning it for full autonomous aerial deployment. Moments later, the enchanted mouse shot forward, its propulsion roared to life, and it dove into stealth mode on a daring infiltration flight. MK1 detonated on impact, punching through walls and leaving Lias and the others frozen in stunned, breathless awe. Steam curled up as she sipped tea like it was nothing, promising them the assassination plan would run flawlessly. Lias clocked it instantly. The negotiation wasn't a talk at all, it was a trap meant to land the first strike and slam the terms down before any doubt could creep in. With confidence fully locked in, Rate leaned in, seized control, and steered the conversation straight into negotiating his reward. A weird armored teapot steps up to challenge them, then the intruders go wild when a cup shatters right in the middle of a tense, silent tea ritual. Confused out of his mind, Rate watches as the teapot soldiers kick off a brutal, no-nonsense investigation, hunting down the culprit. As the cheers roll in, suspicion crawls right behind them and the group's move sparks chaos, knocking over cups and yanking everyone's attention in an instant. Lias throws down a huge reward and demands one thing: Rates has to take down the sorcerer Satyrs, using the method. Calmly, he pushes for a landing with secrecy and a real alliance, then the pieces click into place for a covert operation. He lays bare the danger of being exposed, fighting to keep both his assassin past and his production work hidden. Laius leans in and presses for details about the alliance, standing right beside a wall packed with weapons laid out with deadly precision. He laid out his terms clear as day, equal partnership for both sides, and every request came with the choice to accept or shut it down. He starts grilling the whole idea of authority, ripping into the kingdom's obsession with titles and flashy, fake power. Trust snaps into place, both men lock eyes, shake on it hard, and with that handshake their assassination mission ignites for real. Sadarx the sorcerer was pinned down as the target, and the deal came with land, strict secrecy, and a deadly alliance. They hashed out attack plans, knew poison would take months to work, and still agreed that a straight-up assault could land faster if everyone could stomach the bigger risk. Lee demanded total certainty, pushing for a method that was flawless, because she'd rather win than rush. He demanded to test the defenses and magic, checking how ready the place really was before he built a tailor-made infiltration plan. While everyone else handled the investigation, Ray slipped into the castle and gathered the crucial clues himself. Laius promises to keep the mission under wraps, sealing their trust on the spot. No second thoughts, no hesitation. As night drifts in calm and soft, everyone else rests or washes up, but behind shut doors the real work keeps going, planning, quiet watching, and nothing but secrets. Just as she finally catches her breath, she strolls back to her room, completely oblivious to the intense negotiations still raging behind the scenes. Morning hits and the spiky-haired warrior suddenly bursts back in, delivering shocking intel right in the middle of everyone's discussion. A battlefield map blossoms on screen, fresh details hit like sparks, and the whole crew starts plotting strategy around the mission route. That weird, pillow-soft bed totally throws the soldier off. His gut screams sabotage the moment he spots something shoved under the mattress. Lumia jolts awake to morning sunlight, moving in silence as her mind spirals back to last night's brutal discussion and the outcome it left behind. She tightens her smile, hands over the last piece of intel, and you can see the worry underneath. Now every scrap of what they know about Sadarx is finally out in the open. Everyone crowds around Lumia with warm greetings, and for a brief moment the tension slips away as the preparations quietly kick back into motion around the main discussion table. Confidently, he pegs the odds of success using nothing but magical tools, and the declaration hits the group like a lightning strike, shocking everyone while somehow blowing them away. Everyone dug into a hearty meal, and Raid just proved the assassination method, using only enchanted tools, no help needed. Laius, clueless about covert tricks, threw his full trust into his rates expert and that calm, unshakable professionalism. Once the timing was nailed down, they confirmed the truth. Linearlia wasn't far at all, just a 3-hour ride from the capital. They handed over a materials list, magic stones, bronze, and iron, all stocked up for a deadly one-day operation. The whole plan got yanked over to Linearlia's trusted merchant, Arwin, and the second budget worries hit. The room erupted into awkward, comedic silence. Excuses for going broke popped up the moment it happened. Since that sudden transfer yanked everything away, Goldo was left scrambling with zero preparation and no money to back him up. Nobody else had anything to bring to the table, and even Rate, cool as he tried to look, finally admitted he was broke too. They tossed the invoice idea aside and immediately started thinking, we need to reach out to the chivalric order, maybe they'll bankroll us. Secrecy suddenly became a huge problem, so Rate pushed the idea of hunting monsters for stones, as long as they could get the metals under control. Lies laid out how snagging huge metal shipments in secret would smash their limited budget, strain their manpower, and leave them with zero room to waste time. Molten iron hissed and spat sparks as Wraith swung his hammer, forging the tools he'd need for future magical upgrades. Broke and desperate, the Rate marched into Laius and pitched a rare Neg 2 potion for sale. The merchant froze mid-breath, then blurted out the truth. Most potions get sold for way less than they cost, unless demand spikes or rare ingredients shove the price way up. Ray didn't even flinch. He suggested they craft a level -4 potion instead, and that calm confidence left Laius completely stunned. Liss revealed level -2 potions used to be royal-only treasures, crafted just once every 3 years by master alchemists. Rate froze in shock because he suddenly realized just how absurdly rare a level -2 potion really was. He didn't go chasing something too big, he proposed brewing a level -0 potion instead, still powerful and way easier to make. Without a second thought, he dumped pure water into the cauldron, then tossed in the ingredients with lightning-quick, razor-sharp moves. Everyone just stared, wide-eyed and frozen, as Rate calmly laid out his plan to cut the potion levels down. Laius snapped, staring at the horror. Rate diluted a national treasure until anyone with money could scoop it up. Raid calmly brewed potions in the lab, knowing every drop was the key to safeguarding the kingdom's future. Lise just stared in shock as the enhanced potion slammed back down to level 0, ripping his senses apart with total, unexpected confusion. Once the complete process rate was locked in, he confirmed production of the level 0 potions and then hurried to get permission to sell them. He slipped out under the cover of night to pass them out in secret, terrified the enemies or that chivalric order would catch him. To slip past the watchful eyes, Lays discreetly passed a hidden magical tool, quiet fuel for the undercover plan. Raid flipped on the magical disguise tool, and a blinding burst of light swallowed Goldo in an instant. The transformation finished flawlessly. Goldo's whole look flipped in an instant, leaving his allies staring, completely stunned at the stranger he'd become. He shot a nervous glance at the mirror, praying the disguise looked real enough to fool everyone standing right there. Stunned by Raid's craftsmanship, the whole team huddled up and mapped out their journey, blown away by just how deadly that tool really was. Right before they left, Rate snapped to Goldo, "Stay put where the voices can't shift, because only then would their secret plan stay buried." Commands hit like a trigger. Say terminate to rip the disguise away, then hit activate and the magical transformation snaps back instantly. After those final checks, the crew slipped into the forest, waving goodbye as they were warned loud and clear to stay sharp and alert. He stared at his workspace like it betrayed him, clocked every flaw, and seriously considered rebuilding the whole thing for sharper, better toolcraft. As he hunted for materials, a voice cut through the air and snapped him out of his focus, turning his curiosity up to max about that unfinished conversation from earlier. With a grim look on his face, the man dropped a crucial truth, and it hinted at a whole bigger scheme spinning behind the mission. Elderlius leaned in, eyes sharp, and grilled Raid about just how far his magical disguise tool could really go. Tone tipped over the silence like a blade, silently reading Lyo's intentions, and instantly knew there was something bigger hiding behind that request. And yeah, Laius got called into the probe too, and everyone kept digging, even though nobody could figure out why a girl like her would need transformation magic right this second. Laius teased a wicked future plot, assassination, and asked Raid to back her up, promising real pay in return. Just as the serious talk was heating up, Lumia burst in with bright joy, proudly showing her father the coat she'd just mended. Lumia peeked in, panicked she'd interrupted, then Laius smiled and gently told her, "We just finished." Raid didn't even blink. He stepped away with purpose, trusted Lumia to take over, and spun straight into his next mission. Curious as ever, Lumia pressed for details about what they'd been saying, but Rita just dodged the question, and then suggested they build a tiny alchemical workshop instead. Massive stone blocks blasted out of glowing magic circles, while his power carved the land into a fortress-like forge. Raid moved in complete silence and zeroed in on the truth. He wasn't chasing Saturx at all, he was hunting the divine ruler, Masarazal. Magical energy erupted like lightning as structures slammed together and reshaped themselves, pushing Rate's journey forward, just another step on a much bigger road. Royal ties meant almost nothing. Messi's kingdom was valuable because it could stand up to brutal divine power, so everyone treated them like a prime ally. Gods powered by faith created a terrifying trap. If the believers ever got control, they could rip the divine influence straight out from the inside. He was laser-focused on surviving the future, and he knew diplomacy wasn't optional, it was the key, so Mice's kingdom wouldn't end up blocking them later. Elsewhere, strange figures rolled in with supplies and raw power, setting the stage for trouble as the storm around Rate's mission kept getting worse. Two warriors rolled up to the outpost, straightened their backs, and respectfully handed Laias their mission results the moment they returned. They hauled 140 kilograms with just 2 people, loading iron, copper, and magic stones into the load with zero backup. Rate studied the iron's flaws one by one, then decided to use it anyway since it would work for practical crafting. Up close, the older man was blown away. He praised Rates for his surprising raw strength and the steady, calm way he handled every material. The womb bundle was packed with strange herbs, and I only figured out what they were after I heard they'd been gathered personally by Rachel earlier. Rachel's companion broke down exactly what the herb was for, and handed over a magical tool you'd need to make potions. With the ingredients locked in place, he finished the setup in record time and left everyone stunned at how fast that workshop had sprung into existence. Before anything started, he blared that the workshop would be sealed tight for safety, so the only way in or out was through outside communication. Suspicions snapped into place the moment secrecy started, but then the Rate made it crystal clear. This wasn't just secret. It was the kind of danger that could get you killed. Even allies knew you can't treat deadly tools like toys, making them always comes with real risk, and it haunts you with regret. With Rate pushing his companion to rest, responsibility snapped into his hands as he promised he'd take over the night's work. They went way past the workshop hours, building a big outdoor bath so everyone could soak, recover, and slam back into action before the next mission. Urgency swallowed any chance of comfort. He stayed up all night, hammering out his work so he'd be ready for the morning deadline. Rebuilding the palace wasn't just a win, it was the key move that would shake the nation back into stability. Respectfully, the warrior stepped out, trusting the Rates as the flames of creation ignited inside the sealed chamber, sealing his resolve. As magic circles spun and transformation spells burst to life, the workshop's interior warped and reshaped itself to fit its exact purpose. With steady control, he summoned dimensional item slots and lined up the tools needed to forge the weapon's core parts. Fury-like focus surged, energy whipped around wildly while vicious blades and dangerous elements tore free from the raw material. Light tore across the floor as mechanical limbs burst out, snapping together every piece in flawless sync. No second thoughts, no delay. With floating arms closing in, he lit the cave of 10,000 hands, turning it into a mobile forge chamber. Rate slammed the alchemical code, energy surged and ancient patterns erupted across his mask like fire in stone. The code cracks open reality, distant memories flood in, mechanical limbs twitch to life, secret orders click into place, and a girl keeps silently watching like she already knows what's coming. An explosion ripped open the morning silence and the guards just couldn't react. Something unknown tore through their defenses like it owned the place. Smoke tore apart and outshot a deadly flying machine, razor-winged, razor-precise, sweeping the sky for its exact targets. No pause, it latched onto the signal, breathed out its final command and screamed, "Terminate," before diving. As the smoke finally cleared, Ryo launched the drone and the guards snapped into panic mode, tracking every sharp, calculated move as it shot toward freedom. Raid met his eyes with a cool stare, confessed the blunder, and smothered his real intent behind a smooth, practiced apology. He nodded to confirm the test was over, then slid the sealed cargo into his hands. No extra words, just business. Raven Rate hammered its durability in, and the soldiers snapped the crate shut tight as the cart thundered off for their next destination. Staring down those liars, he flashed the signal, no speeches, just locked eyes, and that's when the mission ignited. Morning light slashed through the treetops, and Raid steadied his heartbeat as his very first assassination mission finally kicked off. Lias laid out the whole operation with icy calm, because the disguises, the location, and the timing had to snap into place with deadly precision. Once Sadurk's disguise shattered, each one of them got a magical mask, and Lias stepped in to handle the cleanup and keep everything covered. With just one word, reality snapped, and everyone's identity shattered. Then the illusions swallowed his teammates one by one, making them blend right in with the common crowd. Nervous thoughts swarmed Lumia's mind. One wrong step and everything crumbled, but Rate had already mapped every possible ending. People started wondering how good the disguise really was, and when the ratty just gave clipped answers, everyone's mind raced. Who could swap with who, and could they switch mid-mission? Wanted posters matched every detail, and that meant they had to rewrite their faces fast, tweaking their looks to slip past those descriptions. Lee pitched gender balance for the disguise, pair up 2 men and 2 women so nobody would bat an eye. Ray pitched a whole peddler family plan, Goldo would be the mother, and Lias and Lumia would be the kids. Objections snapped into the conversation fast. Lias fired back, pushing that being a merchant fit his role better, like it made perfect sense. Surveillance data screamed that recognition risk was sky-high, so the rate urged mismatched roles to throw off their routine and make their next moves unpredictable. Without a shred of pushback, both men gave in, nervous eyes flickering, fists locked down like they were bracing for impact. With one single press, the tools snapped to life, and gender-swapping magic swirled violently around Goldo as his body began to change. Magic reshaped his form, yet the proportions stayed locked in place, and unease hit hard as the towering new shape made the stairs appear. Laughter shattered the tension. Lumia blurted out an apology and Rate stayed calm, reassured her, and snapped their attention right back on track. Lumia yanked her sleeves snug and with hands shaking, pulled a tiny creature out of a magical charm. Makichin got the handoff. This trusty support familiar was built to jump in with tactical help the moment it mattered. Tears spilled as gratitude surged, and she cradled the creature with tenderness. Lumia leaned close and whispered that her heart was thankful. Final checks done, he snapped the Rate to the group and stared them down, making sure every disguise sat tight, no slips. Steel-eyed faces lined up behind Rate, and side by side they swore they'd rip Mrs. out of Sadark's ironclad grip. Disguises snapped into place and the whole crew burst forward. At dawn, the mission to reclaim Mrs. finally kicked off. Requests kept flooding in non-stop, same ones, same rhythm, day after day, contract after contract, even after nearly 1,000 deals. The world used to blaze with meaning, but now it just smoldered in silence. His drive burned out completely. He kept his eyes on the far-off valley, and wonder and dread churned as he asked himself, could divine opposition finally light a fire under his spirit? No hesitation, he dropped down the cliff and rocketed toward those sealed crates, stamped with ancient summoning alchemy circles. Energy tore through his wrist as the device clicked on, snapping his blade into a new form with one command. Magical pillars snapped to life around Rate, and when he thrust his blade at the formation, glowing rings burst outward. The sealed crates ripped open, and mechanical parts clicked into place one by one, moving in perfect sync like a choreographed machine coming alive. Tiny creatures crawled out of their containment cells, and with a silent command, Rate signaled the operation to start. Rodents scurried in fast, piling beneath the towering device like they knew, somehow, exactly where they were meant to stand in formation. Metal birds blasted out of the structure, their wings slicing through the air as the raiders stood frozen below, silent and deadly still. Rate snapped the last glyph into place, and his weapon immediately blasted a pulse straight at the oncoming wave. Once the command system kicked in, holographic data flashed that every single drone and beast had swallowed the orders perfectly. As soon as the signal blared, the animal units bolted ahead, while air support screamed overhead. Meanwhile, back in the village, Lumia noticed how badly things were off. People moved like warning bells, and she confirmed the truth of that impossible threat. Suspicions surged the moment Lumia spoke. On the surface, the villagers looked totally fine, but those hollow eyes screamed that something evil was lurking. Lumia crashed into a stumbling drunk man, and his sudden rant sent cold shivers crawling straight up her spine. Every passerby snapped their heads toward her, eyes dulled and faces empty, while an eerie silence swallowed the street whole. Tension snapped tight and Lumia's crew surged in fast, coins flying to shut it down and stop the standoff before it exploded. The bribes hit the spot, and with a smug chuckle he waved them through, totally blind to the trap snapping shut around him. Raid soothed Lumia, and Rachel warned that any premature brawl would have blown their infiltration mission to pieces. Lumia snapped Rachel back to Rate's preparations, telling him to stay steady as tension crackled between pure logic and raw emotion. Even if he raised doubts about security, he figured a modest home would slip under the radar and trigger fewer alarms. Disguises held their ground all over town, and civilians carried on like normal, right under a surveillance corridor nobody could see. Rape pinpointed the target's exact location, sealing it. This assassin's route cut straight through the airspace above the royal palace. Drones slammed into descent mode, then kicked off a massive detection sweep using activated magic gauge arrays. The detection net snapped to life with violent flashes, screaming out a magical surge that was unlike anything the town had ever sensed. Target locked in, he pinpointed the spot and kept his gaze nailed to the dome, the shaped facility sitting right below him. A brand new barrier snapped into place in stacked layers and shifting directions, and it screamed one thing: the enemy was already lining up for a full-on showdown. Even with a shell built to take a hit, the right internal strike could still crack the shield with surgical precision. A nearby scout cut straight to the plan: seal the outside, slip in from the inside, because that was the team's only shot. A group of strange rodents erupted out of nowhere, spinning like tiny tornadoes as they snapped into a perfectly coordinated charge. They slipped into the underground path, shot through a tight sewer route, and vanished without a single palace guard even noticing. They wasted no time and burst into the capital's interior, streaming live footage that pinpointed exactly where the guarded chamber sat. Right then, Rado clocked the monitor, seeing the rodent hit the mark, and watched them gear up for the next entry. Goldo announced his arrival, and right as his contact finally made it clear, the calm guy finished his meal, then snapped up on his feet. They checked in with the team and got the word that every single one of them had safely made it to the temporary base. With the link still alive, the device demanded fresh updates, forcing them to rush back with everything they spotted inside the locked building. They confirmed the worst: every castle inhabitant, even the kids, had been hit with total magical brainwashing by some unknown force. Stunned by Sadark's sudden delay, Rate demanded answers. Why hold back that kind of crushing power until right now? His suspicions kept clawing deeper because the timing felt staged, like it was meant to lock onto something only Sadarks truly understood. A jolt of memory crashed back, an old request, maybe tied to Sadark's still mysterious delay in how he manipulated things. Hiding behind cold stone pillars, Rate leaned in and hissed the mission. If Prince Kosis was still alive, they had to find him. Rodin slid forward unnoticed, while Ally sent quiet encouragement through the air, trusting the next move was already theirs. Inside the chamber, Sadark pored over his documents, blissfully unaware as danger crept in under his heavily guarded nose. A sudden crack in the security rate opened, and his scout pounced on it instantly, no hesitation at all. Faint magical runes shimmered on the doorway, and the instant he almost triggered the alarm, he didn't even notice the trap waiting for him. Didn't get ready for that sniper shot, visibility collapsed, and the target's position stayed totally hidden inside. And the Rate evaluated defenses, tight enchantments, and heavy physical reinforcements, blew past expectations, even though the royal chamber was already locked down. Sadark laid out the ugly truth behind religious conversion, showing how they pushed missionaries city by city to force everyone's beliefs to bend. From far away, I pieced together the regime's real agenda, how they'd been hiding Sadark's takeover of Mind's power. Resistance rippled town to town, but every conversion attempt crashed. People clung to the gods their families had worshipped for generations, refusing to let go. Worried his power was slipping, the Sadarks cranked everything up and even teased a brand new deity, Luris Mars. To crush any last spark of rebellion, Sadak ordered an inquisition to form at once, then set their execution for tomorrow, ready to punish every dissenter. Extortion, dressed up as faith conversion, mirrored Masara Zulu's cruelty, and Rate saw straight through the mask. With urgency climbing fast, Rate buzzed Goldo and asked the crew if anyone had heard of Luris Mars. 30 years ago, Luis Mars blew up overnight, promising real, practical rewards that yanked people in from the start. Freedom drew people in with free bread and generous acts, and its temples preached giving so loudly that everyone missed the hidden motives simmering underneath. Even with everyone rooting for them, the cash stayed locked away, and suspicion went nuclear as rumors of corruption and bribery raced through the streets. They carved demographic lines, older generations rallied behind Messis, while most of the young citizens threw their support behind Luris Mar. Something sinister churned deep underground, and while curiosity pulled everyone's gaze away, shadowy things started to stir and wake up in the dark. A hooded figure snapped a mind-bending spell into place, unleashing a brutal wave of dark summoning energy. The moment the magic surged, the whole team snapped to it. Someone had uncovered their exact location. Explosions tore through the city as summoned beasts burst from the ground, ripping into everything with zero hesitation. As the battle erupted, Goldo and Lumia charged in, striking back with ferocity and demanding the intruder's identity right then and there. From the swirling dust, two brutal enemies burst into view, revealing their trap and laughing at how badly the stealth attempt failed. Golda warned the prince that the ones blocking their way weren't normal guards at all. These were manipulated former knights, standing right in front of them. Guards jeered at their old days while the enemy strutted in, flexing his power and bragging as he crushed two of them without breaking a sweat. Suddenly, one of them lunged in and unleashed a magical strike straight for Goldo's chest. He fired back with a secret hidden technique, snapping the truth into view. Kroon's marking spell had been used to track them the whole time. Blindsided by the truth, the prince snapped that Krine's betrayal couldn't be real. He was sure that man would never turn his back. Those murky eyes were the giveaway for the control magic. If it had been here, it would have left unmistakable signs, but nothing showed up. Accusations tore through the air, and every past move and potion Sale Lyos made only hinted that his sudden return was hiding something far darker. Instead of talking, the enemy leaned in and demanded answers. How on earth did Leia survive all night alone in monster territory? Tension snapped as Laius grilled them about their motives, demanding the real truth behind their alliance with Sardarks. A shadowy figure sneered at them from the dark, insisting they had no clue what really makes a ruler worthy. A deafening shout tore through the chaos. Power is the only truth worth chasing, as the world around them crumbled. Fanatics screamed about freedom, dominance, and stealing, convinced brute power was the only key to their warped desires. They sold a deal that turned into pure cruelty, saying weak kings didn't deserve to rule and sure as hell weren't worth defending. Laias finally caught up with what was happening. Then a new shadow surfaced and the thing he feared most stood there fully exposed. Bold plans snapped into motion as they announced a brand new kingdom, rising under Luris Mars' ironclad command. Battle sprang a brutal ambush, and Mars had to scramble in real time as the whole tide of fight flipped in the blink of an eye. Bada got slammed by a brutal punch, blasting him through the wall and silencing his rant mid-sentence. Mars snapped with fury. He accused betrayal. Then he drove a razor-precise slash straight through his defenses without a second of hesitation. Insults ricocheted through the chamber as one more ally burst in late, totally unfazed by the enemy's loud, empty boasts. They calmly admitted they were late, then sprinted from the nearby stable and slipped in through a back entrance route. Lumia burst into her father's arms, shaking with relief, finally safe after the chaos exploded everywhere. As Mars shrieked in pain, the knight stared hard, convinced his sudden escape was all a cunning trick. A chilling laugh echoed after him, then he swore death would drag in slow, cruel torment, grinding every ounce of suffering out of him. As dark threats cranked up, he pictured cruel punishments, and Laias had to seize command right then, no delay. Blades sprang free in an instant, and the knights braced to cut Mars down before he could strike again. No hesitation at all, both warriors surged forward, roaring for the chance to unleash the royal swordsmanship of the Massese Kingdom's elite. A brutal cyclone of energy detonated in midair, hurling debris everywhere, while he surged forward through the chaos with zero fear and no pause. Blades flashed around him as he unleashed Mice's Kingdom's technique, driving the enemy into a frantic defensive stance. Even with Bada's tricky butterfly magic snapping at him, Raid bulldozed forward, not a bit shaken. Illusions be damned, and that assassin's eerie confidence couldn't slow him. Racial, fueled by satirics, triggered Scale Storm, then terror tore open as wings erupted, unleashing a lethal surge of magic. Before Raid could even react, his allies erupted with warnings as a crushing wave of magic energy swelled ominously behind the enemy's spell. Rachel tore through the battlefield with a magical barrage, smashing everything in her path, friends and foes alike, under a blinding, shimmering storm. Taunting words crashed through the chaos, but the Rate held firm, his glare snapping onto the smirking butterfly mage. Sting and Racial teamed up for a brutal strike, Racial blasting a nail gun that rained dark blades in endless, relentless bursts while Sting bore down too. He froze mid-step, breath shallow, eyes locked ahead, then felt his heart start to steady as something unknown churned deep in his mind. After all the chaos, when things finally cooled down, his comrades shoved food into his hands, and that warmth snapped the tension in half after the brutal fight. Done, the craftsman fired up the forge and unveiled custom gear for everyone, kicking it off with a magical shield built in a totally unique design. No hesitation, his shoulder shield snapped to life, forged to match Goldo's brutal fighting style while hardening his defense for impact. The instant the shield deployed, a blazing barrier roared outward and caught every incoming blast, sealing the allies in light without even flinching. They rushed into inspection, the crest's raw power blazing their curiosity, and sealing the truth that it works when the pressure hits. Their enemies went wide-eyed. After that defense, Raid and Goldo just stood there, completely unharmed behind the summoned shield. Razel calmly snapped a new spell into place, certain his intricate butterfly magic could stab straight through any defensive barrier. Glowing particles surged ahead like a tidal wave, shoving their allies into new positions and dragging them to strike hard instead of leaning on luck. Rate screamed a warning, then clocked Razel's hidden trap snapping back to life mid-fight. King Laia's was handed a ring forged just for him, because it was meant to help him defend everything. Unfazed, Laia's snapped up the directional barrier, flames whipping tight in a spinning ring as he barked at the others to strike without pausing. Flames arced around Laia's barrier as it surged forward, blasting enemies from the front and leaving them reeling at its deadly direction. Critics fell quiet when Sting spun around, stunned by the shield's secret. He could unleash attacks while keeping his defense locked in. Pride surged through Sting as he lunged forward, blasting a spiraling storm of fury straight at Rate. Energy ripped through the air, but the hit wouldn't stick. Sting's eyes widened with confusion as his strike suddenly failed. Pushed in the moment, the door opened, closed the gap in a flash, and landed a perfect hit, ending the fight before any new spell could even start to spark. Rate leaned in, eyeing the item with burning curiosity, totally thrown off by the label, until a magic sword named *** Burning Ceremony * snapped into focus. The company, he said plainly, this wasn't normal equipment. It was a one-time weapon forged from blazing wood, crafted so different from the safer gear everyone else got. In the dead quiet, Raid clutched the ceremonial blade up high, and it hummed with mystery, dangerously powerful, like doom wrapped in metal. Sting already, irate, then rage detonated in my chest and I reeled at the weapon that looked nothing more than a plain stick. Rage flared in him as he snapped at everyone for mockery, yet he still couldn't see the tool's hidden power hiding in that plain, humble shell. Battered and wheezing, Sting blew out in frustration, jaws clenched, because he didn't expect Bada to casually toss him a healing charm. As the Rate hit the memories, he remembered the sword's hidden fire enchantment, deadly when it worked, but pure chaos the moment battle lit it up. That warning got tossed aside. Sting fired up for payback, blind to the enemy's changing plan while restrained worry kept creeping in on Bada. Instead of fear, the enemies just watched in silence, eyes sharp, every move measured, so calm it screamed that something far worse was coming. In the roaring flames, the allies froze because they'd just felt it, that unmistakable aura, that impossible presence back again. Like one nightmare belief finally shattered. Panic rippled through the crowd as Sadark's body erupted with wild, unstable power, and in the blink of an eye, he transformed in a way nobody saw coming. Power exploded with brutal force, smashing every barrier in sight and blasting blazing projectiles straight at the capital, sending the whole fortress into a wave of terror. Birds burst into the sky over collapsing towers, while cold mechanical falcons hovered in silence from the enemy's mysterious flying craft. Laia's and the others froze in shock, and when the smoke cleared, they finally understood this blast wasn't random, it was a pinpoint assassination strike. Deception ripped the truth open, this panic was staged, so when Sadark's team rushed back to defend, they walked right into the enemy's trap. In the middle of burning ruins, Sadark calmly sipped tea, acting like every threat was beneath him. Rate spotted the magical defense in a flash, realizing his opponent could move fast, but only inside tight limits. He scanned the defense's weak point, the deadly 2-second window, knowing it would shut down the moment pressure hit. No time to breathe, he unleashed a perfectly synced air assault, hammering the enemy with crushing, overlapping precision strikes. Chanting an ancient incantation, Sadark hurled up protective magic, desperate to survive the brutal second wave coming for him. A jagged dome packed with intricate symbols held its ground, swallowing the chaos and shielding Sadark as the battlefield collapsed around him. Explosions ripped across the far-off hills and even the villagers felt it. Something terrifying was breaking loose beyond their reach. Wrath watched the ritual magic like it was alive, tracking its monstrous power and brutal length as worry crept in. An author-observer stared at the strike's collapse, baffled. had their brutal, relentless push really landed on the one target they meant to hit. Smirking with full confidence, Sadark's followers finally spilled the truth, unleashing only a sliver of his real, terrifying power. When Raid gives the signal, his allies explode into action, blasting the battlefield with relentless magic. A storm of whipping blasts ripped through the sky, an absolute onslaught called the nail machine gun. Shield plates groaned as defenders stumbled backward, their faces frozen in shock from the sheer, crushing surge of the enemy's magic. The crazed warrior blared his brag like a war horn, announcing his transformation, and giving Sadark all the credit for unleashing his brand-new destructive power. Goldo planted his feet and nodded like he'd seen it coming, then warned him in a hard, no-excuses voice, "Don't you dare underestimate anyone again." A sudden blast ripped through the stronghold's wall, slamming the enemy square in the face and leaving them totally stunned. With fearless timing, Rate cut him off and unleashed his next move, Scale Death Rhapsody, a brutal, overwhelming storm of magic. Trapped in that vicious spiral of attacks, the attacker howled in panic as magic blasted him backward. He couldn't fight back at all. Goldo surged to the edge of the limit, slipping past every attack while blasting forward with razor-precise sword swings and relentless speed. With a grin split wide across his face, Raid demanded a real fight, hungry to see true Imperial sword techniques tear-free. A brutal slash snapped the screen razor-clean and ruthless, landing out of nowhere and echoing a move he'd only seen once before. Rage kept boiling because his opponent dared to ask how Racial ever survived using those ridiculous weapons, like somehow it didn't matter until now. With a lightning-fast flourish, he hurled spinning blades into the sky, and they exploded into a blinding storm of projectiles. Magic energy erupted along the blade, supercharging his power and blindsiding the enemy before they could even react. He ignored the mockery and roared so fiercely it demanded respect, because as the battle surged, the stakes turned real. Racial's cocky swagger left him wide open, and a brutal counterattack slammed into him with everything it had. Realizing his tricks were red flags, he panicked. Blades closed in on him from every angle, and there was nowhere left to breathe. He cracked his act for a split second, smirked, then spun around and fired a surprise blast as if he were just backing off. Right before the damage could spiral out of control, a powerful figure stepped in, snapped at Racial, and slammed the brakes on the reckless advance with iron authority. Orders snapped out right away. Pull back and get ready, because the real fight hadn't even started yet. After they regrouped, they admitted that fighting off the lone was pointless and braced for the Rate's item to hit them back. With fresh fire in their hearts, they surged ahead, ready to defend the kingdom's pride with united strength. Mocking them, the enemy told them to obey the former king, practically savoring every second of the chaos it unleashed. Warning cries blared too late. Danger slipped up behind Goldo, masked by magical noise. Prince Bede barreled through like a storm, smashing into debris and leaving everyone staring in disbelief that he could have survived. Bright energy roared through him as he charged ahead, and boom, memories of forest teleportations and past missions hit him like a wave. That sharp, familiar tension crawled over him, like the old training ground was suddenly back under his feet during that brutal mock battle. Spotted again by that tracking magic, he only realized at the worst moment that his opponent had pinned him with pinpoint marks. Frustration surged in his chest. No matter how hard he pushed, nothing he did ever went the way he planned. Hurling through the air in brutal spins, he demanded answers. Was all that intense training really just useless the second real combat started? Memories of brutal battles, loyal comrades, and home hit him like a storm. Then he bursts forward, readying himself for one last stand. Wounds ripped across his body, but he snapped his shield up to guard everyone behind him. No hesitation, not even for a second. With one last explosive strike, his shattered body shattered apart for good, dissolving under the collapsing magical barrier. Their foe watched with icy calm, smirk twisting as he leaned in and whispered, "First one down and I feel zero remorse." The night before they left, Rates cracked open the secrets of alchemy, brewing deadly potions as trusted allies huddled close, ready for what came next. A tiny burst of magic suddenly flared in the air, Raid snapped his eyes shut in pure recognition as the signal hit. No hesitation at all, he blared a warning to everyone, because the magic was a glowing marker that pinpointed their exact spot for enemies they didn't even know were out there. Lias shot his hand up, stopping the removal cold, and his gut tightened when Sadark's nightmare subordinates, Bada and Sting, came flooding back. Rassel got his final orders: play bait and lure the enemies off, while Rate slips in under a magical disguise. Leia stepped out without hesitation, shouting that he'd be the bait, because a real king never hides behind someone else's life. With a voice like steel, he commanded Lumia to stay put, right there under Goldo's sharp, watchful care. Refusing to fall back, Lumia planted her feet and stood her ground, determination blazing as she fought her father's decision head-on. Time dragged in silence until Lias finally broke down and told Goldo, "Protect me if danger shows up." Right before he left, he double-checked he was fully ready. Every last prep was almost done, because whether he wins or falls apart could hinge on the potions. He offered to make specialized tools, dead sure they'd hit harder in battle than any ordinary potion. Even with everything prepped, frustration swallowed him whole. Doubt crept in while everyone else faced danger, and he just stood there doing nothing. A sudden strike detonated out of nowhere. Razel charged in alone, trapped in a furnace of fire and chaos, shielding his allies without even blinking. Everyone crashed into fierce combat. Lumia bolted to the fallen comrade, trying to heal them as destruction tore through everything at breakneck speed. She shoved her fear aside and poured the potion, burning to save him, while he slurred weak reassurances under his breath. Lumia demanded he rest, cutting off his desperate protests, and told him to run while he still had the strength. Even after she ordered him to stop, he kept apologizing. Then he stared at Rayton in the distance, silently handing over everything like it all depended on him. Tears poured into her eyes as Lumia screamed, while the knight sank in regret for dishonoring Mice's kingdom yet again. Suddenly, an enemy dropped in out of nowhere and bragged that resistance was pointless, then charged forward, crushing Lumia with pressure so brutal she had no choice but to face it head-on. The moment Lies lunged after Lumia's fall, steel screamed as swords collided, spells detonated in bursts, and pure chaos swallowed the battlefield, no second thoughts. He towered over them, staring back at their old days as classmates, utterly baffled by how they'd split into completely opposite roads. He took that invitation, ditched blind loyalty, drank in power through the Sadarks, and left everyone behind who was dragging him down. Temptation fogged his mind, and as explosions boomed around him, he couldn't help asking, was his strength really worth this kind of betrayal? Magic exploded with savage force, and somehow the caster pulled off chants so advanced they'd usually take years, perfect, clean, and flawless. Power surged in silence. Then Rate unleashed his counterattack and revealed a spell that was so far beyond ordinary understanding it felt unreal. A black aircraft screamed across the sky, charging straight for the enemy's stronghold like it had zero doubts. Built to obliterate, that sword swallowed volatile magic, and it was so heavy it couldn't lift off without help. From a distance, Sadark spotted the missiles blazing and hissed through his teeth, knowing something terrifying was charging in at full speed. Blood dripped from his chin as he launched a chant, calling magical defenses to snap into place instantly. Ray watched the colossal incantation erupt before him, eyes sharp as he measured every inch of its power and threat. Shockwaves slammed through the mountains as that massive explosion swallowed everything inside the spell's containment sphere. Out of the rubble, the caster rose like nothing happened, magic blazing in him, and his terrifying aura crushed every single doubt. Another foe snapped to action, igniting a flaming ring because he realized his opponent's power wasn't something you could brute force. He'd need more than expected just to survive. Temptation slammed back into his head, shattering loyalty and dragging him towards strength, while the racial wrestling with that offer couldn't stop the words from echoing. His hand twitched, then shot forward, not to give up but to slam the door on betrayal and rise even stronger. Rassel shut the offer down on the spot, and with zero hesitation he swore his loyalty to the royalty, choosing honor over any power stolen through betrayal. Enraged, the cultists snapped back at their defiance, calling them unworthy and vowing they'd end up as sacrificial tools. Lumia stepped forward like she owned the moment, defying their ideology and ripping the mask off their manipulation of innocent citizens. No hesitation at all. Even with warnings screaming at her, she charged headfirst into the truth, forcing herself to face the brutal question, Does power ever earn the right to control people or to rip out the heart of the Messi's kingdom? That devastating blast got cut short, and Lumia, stunned, demanded answers from the one who'd come to end her. A sharp question snapped into his mind, and when her steady, fearless eyes locked onto his, hesitation suddenly rose like a wall he couldn't climb. Her power wasn't about being big. It was about dominance. Like she rolled in and suddenly the memories of unbreakable warriors came roaring back. Her clenched fists shook as she launched forward, blasting through rubble and smashing every expectation in one thunderous leap. As they huddled behind cover, their allies shouted that a surge of magic was tearing through the area, because the danger was exploding by the second. Under crushing pressure, Sting swallowed his pride and apologized. His orders were razor clear, but raw emotion hijacked the perfectly planned strike. A blast of dark magic tore from the enemy's chest, slamming the battlefield with brutal pressure and catching everyone off guard. He froze in disbelief, and suddenly Luris Mars blasted through his mind, the same power he once followed without a single doubt. Sadark's voice boomed over the battlefield, crushing the chaos to silence, and wiping the traitor from the scene without even a second thought. With contempt, Sadark spat a curse in the air, summoned cursed energy, and mocked them as the disgrace of the fallen Messi's kingdom. When they realized the satirics were ready to die for magic, the desperate soldiers crumpled to their knees and begged for mercy. Spiral Requiem ripped upward into the sky born from sacrifice, and the Sadarks laughed at their own deaths, calling them pointless and humiliating. Screams ricocheted through the crushing blast, and in an instant disbelief shattered, pain ripped through broken bodies while pride got crushed right along with them. Memories of their suffering slammed back, and the Wraith and his friend replayed that betrayal they once swallowed in silence. The betrayer rose again, blasting out massive magic that swallowed everything in a relentless wave of destruction. Ali scrambled as the barriers split apart, and one man screamed while clutching the shield, begging Goldo to get out right now. Goldo demanded Lumia run with Razel, but she snapped back. She wouldn't leave anyone to suffer. Lumia stepped forward with her resolve blazing just like her father's, then planted herself in front of danger, standing as a shield with unshakable quiet strength. Magic flames tore through the air, but they didn't break. They stood shoulder to shoulder, daring Sadark's cruelty and overwhelming power. Goldo snapped to it. Razel's power was fading fast, and Sadark's dark spell was sucking the life right out of him. Clutching his weapon like it was life itself, Raisa kicked off the burning ceremony, ready to win or burn with it. Flames erupted the moment the spell sparked, and wild, spiraling energy blasted upward, making the enemies throw up their guard on pure instinct. Inside Rassel's sword, hidden techniques awaken, like they were carved straight into his soul, guiding his every move. Confidence hardened into pure strength as power surged from his stance, and he faced the crushing odds like victory was still within reach. Goldo rallied the team, slamming himself between Lumia and the attackers as the battlefield erupted, and the enemy lines scattered in the chaos. The overhead Gigaspiral Requiem let loose a colossal fusion spell, then tore downward with pure, earth-shattering magical power. Raisel lunged forward, flames roaring at his back, and he swore that with one last strike, this would finally be over. Childhood training and pure pain crashed into his mind as he geared up to unleash his ultimate attack. Years of growing pain and hard-won battles had forged his resolve, each bond he'd built back then now blazing inside him with unstoppable power. Laughter from the good times and scars from the hard ones roared inside him as power surged together, shaping into a divine formation. Everything just clicked, his whole body erupted in blinding light, swords flying everywhere as his eyes locked onto the target. Even though they were the same age, regret slammed into him hard, like he'd waited too long and watched everything collapse. The glittering binary star tore free, cutting through magic and the sky itself with Mace's Kingdom's last imperial sword technique. I won't pry where he went wrong, because we both just chose different truths to chase. Light blazed across the heavens as their joined fate finally snapped into place. Then all that's left is the cold silence of an apology that never lands. Rain drifted down softly while survivors stared in awe. Raid's magical weapon tore through the sky and locked their fate in place. Lumia whipped her head around, clueless to the danger closing in, and when her allies finally noticed, it was already too late. A shadowy attacker surged at her, slamming forward with a hidden vial clamped tight in one hand, aiming right for her. Surprise and confusion hit like lightning, and the people nearby surged forward, only to find their answer arrived a few heartbeats too late. Right from beneath Lumia's chest plate, a hidden mechanism snapped out, and out came a tiny armored warrior primed to counterattack. The enemy's assault got slammed out of the sky, midair, blasting apart from a savage hit by Lumia's tiny defender. Miniature warriors exploded out of Lumia's item box, tearing into the disguised intruder with a ruthless surprise counterattack. Quick strikes shattered the bottle and deadened the enemy's weapon, yanking the real threat out of hiding. Victory exploded for them. Attackers and defenders alike were left frozen in pure disbelief, because that absurd tactic somehow worked. All around her, worried voices screamed, "Lumia!" as her allies surged forward, and thank goodness she was still alive and untouched after the ambush. She made it clear she was safe, then praised her tiny companions. Those brave little fighters showed up and defended her without a single hesitation. Crumbling ruins and wounded civilians laid bare the savage, heartless hit Sadark launched on ordinary people. Tension surged in the air as the prince's escort snapped into action, urging them to retreat quietly and dodge the spotlight until they could regroup for their next strike. A colossal spill of pitch-black light blasted out of the royal palace, freezing everyone mid-breath in stunned silence. Two shadowy figures kicked off a ritual and ripped raw power straight across the skies above the capital. Flames swallowed the fortress as relentless magical blasts roared across it, shaking the mountain itself like it might split in two. A glowing sphere snapped shut around the summoned creature, then it surged forward, slicing through blinding winds as deafening detonations rattled everything in its wake. Enemies staggered back under a crushing onslaught, and synchronized attacks erupted midair in tight formation, zeroing in on magical cores with deadly precision. His projectile tore through the air like a spear, relentlessly homing in on its exact target below. The enemy commander snapped to the spells stalking him, blew up with rage, and hurled counter-detection magic, then shouted a challenge, daring him to come at the Rate. Rate fired another shot, then slammed the brakes. His magic wasn't fully charged yet, and going toe-to-toe with that monster would have been suicide. Through the wrecked battlefield, the enemy sneered from behind cover, laughing off Rate's fight as pointless resistance. With his fist clenched, the noble swore his loyalty to Masara Zulu's ambition, and shoved Rate aside as nothing but common trash. Rate squinted from afar and finally clocked slip Masara Zulu's real name. Then everything snapped into place about who the enemy really was and where they truly stood. A brutal spell slammed into action, and Raid tensed as devastating fusion magic detonated, obliterating the battlefield and ending Liaz's life. Masara Zulu's vision lit a fire under him, and with the king's backing slipping away, he made it his top mission to cut that support. A colossal rupture tore the skies open, and in the same heartbeat, Bada and Sting's magical signature disappeared like it never existed. Confusion detonated the second the surveillance system died. No matter the calculations, nothing ever prepared them for this, and panic flashed behind the enemy's eyes. A crisis order snapped the whole hidden system to life, magic roared to the surface, and the combat gear kicked on instantly to tear back in retaliation. A towering construct shot up into the sky, and just as the enemy forces scrambled to form defenses, something totally unexpected burst out from the collapsing rubble right next to them. Taunting words crashed through the air as the sorcerer tightened his defense, grinning like he already knew their resistance was utterly pointless. Shock tore through him as his fingers seared and burned away, because the forbidden soul-based assassination magic he unleashed at last had ignited everything. Blinding magic exploded over Rate's body as he unleashed soul destruction, the ultimate technique built to wipe sorcerers off the map. Masara Zulu's twisted, distorted body crawled into view and roared, claiming godhood and vowing to devour flesh and soul without even a blink. A counterforce snapped into magical resonance, ripping through the defenses. Barriers didn't stand a chance once crushing stone flooded the area, supercharging the magical vibrations. Soul-targeted magic tore straight through every known defense. Nothing any sorcerer could do could save the essence that anchors reality. A desperate plea spilled into the air, then he demanded one thing in exchange for loyalty: divine protection over his own soul. Rain hammered down as the soul destruction slammed to life, tearing from the sky straight into the fortress with unstoppable fury. Even after the hit shattered him, his broken body surged back up, refusing to quit, burning with rage and barely holding on through pure exhaustion. Rays recognized what the ritual truly meant, while those alien chants traded arms and eyes to keep the soul from slipping away. A magic pulse rippled across the horizon, mapping leftover divine interference, and then something huge started closing in from the east. A monstrous face clawed out of the rubble, whispering death as it stared straight into its hidden prey. Storms howled as guards hauled the princess forward, pushing her through rain-soaked streets where roofs sagged, crumbled, and everyone screamed in panic. Ambush screams tore through the air as the protector threw his shield in front of Lumia. Enemy soldiers surged in from every direction. Lumia watched the crowds go blank and start chanting like they were one noisy wave, and fear slammed into her as the night itself begged her to keep sprinting. They stumbled into a dead-end escape route, hemmed in by surging floodwater and relentless enemy pursuit. Surrounded by mindless townspeople, Lumia clutched her pendant and whispered doubts, desperation closing in from every direction. One command sliced through the chaos, every controlled citizen froze in place, eyes bulging, as the magic threads snapped out of nowhere midair. Confusion hit the defenders like a punch. Mind control snapped off out of nowhere, like some power beyond their understanding shoved the whole thing off its track. Even with doubt hanging in the air, a colossal creature towered over the city, gulping up energy and fueling its power for a brutal, ready-to-strike retaliation. From his cliffside perch, Raid stared down at the massive ritual ramping up into near-divine magic on a terrifying scale. A monstrous command ripped through the air. Then the entity surged forward, blasting devastating energy to wipe out everything within reach. Dodging was hopeless, defensive spells crumbled, and he realized that this was condensed killing intent, forged from pure magic. With magic on full blast, he went all in without a second thought, momentum roaring as he committed to the charge. His voice stayed steady as he vowed to end the threat, no mercy. As soon as the fight kicked off, he started crunching numbers, tracking every last drop of mana, reading the enemy's path, timing their reaction in real time, and measuring the distance between them down to the second. Sweat dripped as Raid snapped his alchemy circle into place, and that countdown timer started slamming down with ruthless speed. Circuits burst into magical fire and Raid slammed his array into motion, choosing the construct pattern, and 3 different mechanisms snapped to life around him. Explosions ripped through the ruins, and from a distance a spy shouted that the rape threat targeting the Zulu was exploding into something far bigger. With a single command, the earth tore open, and out rose 3 towering monkey golems, hauled from nothing by Rate's alchemical design. A zealot screamed praises for Masra Zulu, blissfully unaware that the purge was already sliding in, ready to smash his faith to pieces. Lightning tore across the sky as 3 golems crashed forward and razor energy blades spun outward. Then Rate surged ahead without a second thought. Stone Fist crashed down, golem attacks surged. Rate snapped the blow aside and instantly rebuilt his formation on the fly. Armor split under the pressure, 1 golem crumpled, and a second staggered as that Rate blast tore open its side. With seconds left, a blinding blast erupted across the battlefield. Rate detonated his ultimate alchemic strike. Silence slammed in right after the blast, and Rate stood at the center, grinning as the timer hit 0. A massive surge of energy slammed across the land, instantly vaporizing fields, blasting structures apart, and erasing every enemy in seconds. A jolt of shock tore through the battlefield as one cultist's last breath rattled out, still delusional enough to swear he was divine. Blade lowered his weapon with eerie calm, and Rate's confirmation locked in the mission. No emotion in sight, just raw resolve burning behind his eyes. Relief slammed through the village. Rate's voice confirmed it was real. And after all that terror, their nightmare finally stopped. Joy exploded from him, gratitude poured out, and one man stepped forward, swearing he'd repay that debt someday somehow. Civilians huddled back under Rate's watch, cleanup crews surged into action, and those mouse-like creatures scattered across the shattered city streets. Stretching his neck, he counted 6 days in that other world, and realized he'd already assassinated a divine-tier enemy. A poisoned microneedle was buried in the chaos, and it landed before anyone even noticed, because once that toxin hit, there was no cure. With a smirk carved into his face, he brushed off the gods' upgrades, because raw power was useless against a truly flawless assassination technique. As he gazed over the city, the divine commission slammed back into his mind. one that began at Mrs.'s request. Chaos exploded across the city, crowds scattered, and Sardarks didn't just fight back, he became the first real assassination target for rape. Magic spiraled in layered chance. Then the soul-destroying attack hit a dead end, one wrong step and he'd be erased on the spot. Surviving that mission hit like pure adrenaline, Lumia broke into a smile, grateful for Mize's commission and her loyal, trusted companion. Lumia beamed with her allies and those little mouse creatures crowding around her, because saving this world and giving it fresh life finally felt worth everything. Days dragged by and then, right there, two pairs of eyes locked in silence, like trouble was already rolling in and the next clash was about to explode. A royal messenger sprinted to deliver the king's demand, full official recognition, and promised that a reward would be waiting for him at the palace. That night, one dropped to his knees and bowed so deeply it felt like a vow, his old arrogance smashed into dust, replaced by pure gratitude for Rate's intervention. Right as he tried to leave, Rate yanked him back by shouting his name, then left him with one last incomplete act of kindness. Makachan handed back the repaired sword, quietly slipped in the missing piece without anyone even noticing. Raid wrapped up his farewell by handing out mattresses and supplies, stuff that had already saved lives in the latest fights. Frustration burst right as the night faded, and even with gratitude on his tongue, he never truly felt trust in that Rate settle in. Then everything went quiet again, new tools were set to be forged, piece by piece, while Masra Zulu's assassination plan started snapping into place. Raid burst into the palace out of nowhere and the guards swept him inside in a flash, no questions, no hesitation. Hanging high at that window, he scanned the whole kingdom's layout, clocking every tactical edge and hunting the spots that could be exploited. He dug through the latest assassination clues and spotted it instantly: cheap, low-tier enchantments hiding in royal furniture that should have been flawless. While nobles swarmed in, Raid started doubting why he was even there. Then King Leas showed up like it was nothing. Leah sent the guards packing and demanded privacy. Whatever she had to say was clearly urgent, and it couldn't leave that room. The guards froze for a beat, then Goldo's approval hit, and they backed up fast, no more resistance in sight. Lee snapped up a soundproofing barrier and sealed the room shut in one smooth, practiced magic move. He warned that casual talk could spook the knights, and Raid finally caught the real message lurking underneath. Rate snapped about the missing checks, and Lias hit back with total faith in his partner. Without missing a beat, Lias slid a sealed envelope into their private meeting, steering everything straight toward the rewards they'd earned. They pitched an assassination job, laying out every detail, then dangled secrecy, a plan to wipe out taxes and even land plus an alliance as the big rewards. A jaw-dropping mansion just hit the market, like someone connected to Satex's power hurriedly vanished and left it all behind. Guala, spoiled by riches, leaned on Satex's support and hauled himself a palace, built purely for his own lust and pleasures. His mind control magic shut down any suspicion, hiding his shocking fortune behind what everyone expected from a noble's life. Even with those findings, Rates could feel something bigger lurking, more Sadak's allies still hiding in the dark. Instead of taking the mansion, he demanded permission to smash it. No hesitation, no limits. With a firm hand on the decision, he swore that bringing it down would hit harder than any words. This act would flip subtle threats into undeniable proof, explosions that screamed their power and their intent. When Lias heard the plan, she lit up on the spot, promised her work and supplies as payment for the help, and jumped in immediately. He didn't even need a team, just a pile of materials, and with a grin, he swore he'd build it all by himself. Even though those buildings looked like a nightmare to deal with, Lias nodded and promised Rates the best materials. No hesitation, no questions. Snatching a prime plot in the capital's very heart, he threw a celebration, because his workshop had found the perfect spot. Their agreement demanded real equality. Rate's standing had to match the kingdom's in influence, power, and responsibility, no exceptions. Lias made a quiet power move, asking for Rate's loyalty directly, putting it above any formal service to Mrs. Serving the nation meant diplomacy and strict rules, but working under Lias in private cut through the red tape and handed him real freedom. Elias swore that working together would make everything smooth, but the political shifts ahead kept his gut clenching. With a calm smile, Lias sips his tea and swears the kingdom stays steady, so long as he stays alive and keeps ruling. To calm everyone's nerves, he pushed one message hard: Protect your body no matter how things look or how the enemy threat keeps climbing. After barely surviving an assassination attempt, he grabbed Raid and demanded protection from any future danger. After sizing up the danger, Rate pushed for powerful magical upgrades and tougher security rules to lock down the royal palace, which was dangerously easy to break into. Lias handed the renovation off to Lumia and stepped aside, trusting her completely while he stayed out of it. They both nodded and signed on the dotted line, then sealed it with a firm handshake, trust blazing as a brand new partnership kicked off. The mission suddenly went official. Raid now had a sealed assassination order targeting the sorcerer Sadex, and it was about to explode. After the contract wrapped up, Lias leaned in and teased another gig, another shady lockdown job that felt eerily like the last. Goldo thanked Rate for running the renovations, but every delay set the princess on edge and slowed the whole project to a crawl. He pressed for answers about interference, but Goldo dodged the topic and pivoted straight to food. Red and the unknown knight served up some weird food, and Rate shut it down fast, demanding to know where that shady stuff even came from. Trapped under a mountain of paperwork, Lumia's stomach dropped when Rate burst into her office doorway without warning. Stunned and mortified, Lumia hurriedly scrambled to get herself together, completely thrown off by her guest's sudden, no-warning arrival. Ray laid it all out. He'd come straight to Lumia to ask about the palace's stalled renovation. Lumia stormed into the royal court and took brutal pushback from the aristocrats as she fought to hammer through her security reforms. Rates pored over the renovation papers, his mind racing. Why would nobles panic at structural changes if it meant safeguarding their sovereignty? Sensing something fishy in the air, he offered to walk with Lumia, then kept his real intentions deliberately murky, like he refused to say a word about them. In the formal council, Lumia strode forward and confidently laid out the revised security plan, cutting through the room's silence with fearless, judge-proof energy. Frontier Count Liljeman lifted his hand coolly, then leaned in like he was about to grill her, questioning what her proposal was really hiding and what it could unleash. Rate stood frozen as nobles grilled the proposal's author, like they couldn't decide if he was trustworthy or up to something. Count Lugerman started sniffing out something rotten in the palace renovations, convinced the freshly reinforced outer walls hid secret threats. Lumia stood her ground and shut down the betrayal idea. She couldn't believe someone this deadly would flip sides now. The noble just stood there, completely stunned by her certainty, demanding answers while she kept her terrifyingly literal faith in something as brutal as rape. With chilling calm, Lumia snapped that if rape truly meant harm, they'd be dead already. County Ligamen pushed forward with a hard warning. Magic surveillance could slip secret information right out of the palace walls. Rate stopped arguing and chose a far bolder move. He'd crush every doubt about his loyalty once and for all. He faced the council head-on, read their fear and doubt like a warning sign, and answered with action that left no room for hesitation. He surged forward with iron certainty and vowed to prove his strength. No more empty talk. With a chilling calm, he dared every noble to stand up to him, then swore that his claims would be proven through real assassination attempts. Council members snapped into disbelief, mocking the wild claim that a single Rate could wipe them all out in one night. He soothed them with a calm voice and swore it was just a test, yet even finishing it in one night still felt totally within reach. Skepticism surged as the nobles grilled nobles about his motive, trying and failing to grasp the logic behind his outrageously wild claim. Driven to survive, every noble hammered out brutal, ironclad defenses, leaving nothing to chance as they plotted total personal security. Rate watched their resolve harden, nodded like he approved what he saw, then acknowledged their cooperation with a steady, composed look. With a confident flick of his hand, he cut the session short, daring every single one of them to make it through the night until morning light. At dawn, exhaustion crushed every face and paranoia and fear had stolen every last drop of sleep from them. Then they found buried weapons and chilling messages, and everyone's confidence crashed, because nobody could remember when the defenses got silently torn open. Mental strain crushed wave after wave of nobles, some threw in the towel while the rest finally understood they'd been played and completely outmaneuvered. He didn't even wake up before damning evidence tore the lid off the hidden corruption. Now there's a loaded gun pointed straight at his name. Lumia clocked the jittery look on Count Lysol's face, and right then her worry spiked after that brutal, exhausting overnight test. Terrified to the core, Lysol shut his fears down, denied everything, and still acted like he fully backed the renovation. Action sparked, and the others shot out quick agreement, cheering the plan, shaken to the bone by just how brutally what rate proved itself capable. Ligman blurted out his last question, staring in disbelief as he couldn't wrap his mind around how Rate slipped past personal security that looked untouchable. Even after locking himself in and refusing to take his shoes off, fresh evidence kept popping up, leaving him stunned, wide-eyed, and totally speechless. Toe triggered the point Rate with a magic seal, then threw it down like a warning, ready to reveal secret ways to slip past hidden infiltration. Then boom, paper tags shot into view out of nowhere, and the stunned nobles couldn't wrap their heads around how they slipped in unnoticed. Even inside a locked, guarded chamber, magic tools burst through the defenses, slipping past every layer in total silence without a single alarm. A weird spiked creature got summoned, and the whole room sucked in a breath as tension snapped into place. Even if it looked harmless, it still showed he could slip past any barrier, and reminded everyone that security was never truly guaranteed. Tiny paper creatures had life in their eyes, hidden senses silently taking everything in so their complicated missions ran flawlessly. Seeing just how deep Rate's power went, Lugerman finally trusted him, and only then did he fully understand Lumia's unshakable belief. Nobody dared stand in the way anymore, survival demanded teamwork, and joining the side that paid out became the only move. Lumia called for a vote, and just like that, everyone shot their hands up, no hesitation, as they agreed Rate's palace renovation plan had to happen. Then every noble finally found common ground. Once doubtful, now they all backed the proposal with one bold, united will and deep respect. Approval locked in, then they pushed the outcome-aggressive tactics hard. Somehow it worked, and they won cautious cooperation. A few days after the plan, the workers were ramming their muscles as they hauled a massive cabinet into place under the renovation orders. With Raid's orders driving them, they shoved that massive thing across the palace floor with slow, careful force. Exhausted laborers snapped the cabinet into place just as the rate got approved, finishing another move in his secret, carefully hidden agenda. Gordo finally showed its real purpose, and launched an anti-assassination device that wiped out 5,000 threats in an instant. Once the cabinet went in and the installation rate got the green light, the palace renovation was basically done, and it stood fully fortified. Lumia crept closer, her curiosity blazing as she stared at the cabinet's eerie design, and the fact there wasn't a single handle anywhere. She shot an apology her way, squinting at the strange furniture like it didn't belong, while Rate stayed cool and calmly told her it was locked tight in its sealed state. Lumia couldn't believe how fast things were moving. She blurted out, "Wait, you already finished the whole renovation this soon?" Raid broke down the huge upgrades, restoring the palace's interior to how it was back before it got destroyed. Even with the one-year estimate hanging over them, Carl grinned and announced he was done early, leaving Lumia and everyone in the room stunned. With danger closing in, Raid barked for construction to speed up, then forced Carl past the breaking point. Lumia nodded at Raid's request to review his progress, while Raid raced through the last tasks before the palace handoff. They showed off their ultra-clever defense setups, traps and drills built to hit fast, run safely, and lock in efficiency every single time. Fatigue finally hit Lumia mid-inspection, and right by that sunlit corridor wall, she nodded off in a quiet, instant sleep. Worried to the bone, Rate watched her sleep, clocking the heavy exhaustion that came from juggling the affairs while pushing through renovations. Lumia jolted awake, cheeks burning from that nap, and Raze gently pressed her to slow down and rest the right way. Right before he could slip out, she shot her hand out and froze him in place with one quiet gesture and an urgent look. With eyes set on fire, she pulled him inside and said she had something personal and way too serious to keep bottled up. Uncertainty hung in the air as Lumia slammed the door shut and shot a sharp question. Did he feel anything strange? Without hesitation, she lunged forward, pinned him in place, and demanded to know if anything had changed between them, right now. Time dragged in a heavy silence as Lumia's heartbeat thundered, praying her gesture landed and didn't get missed. Raid studied her every intention, then finally slid a calming hand to gently feel the crack in her magical balance. Healing energy surged through her like a wave, melting the tension she'd been swallowing in silence. Relief hit her the second it happened, and she couldn't help but grin as the stiffness vanished completely. No ache, no leftover discomfort at all. As he laid out his methods, Rate snapped a warning to avoid any sudden moves, and that only made her even more shocked by how fuzzy the whole treatment process was. Lumia spilled about the mattresses being messed up, so the Rate's team had to inspect things, while the others started side-eyeing her strange new behavior. Stiffness hit and tension snapped into place, like his body was begging him to notice something outside that had been bothering him the whole time. Rate finally clocked it. Maki was wedged right inside the mattress, and that's how Lumia's weird posture and brutal fatigue made perfect sense. He remembered tagging Maki to secretly watch the princess, but right after she was sent, the connection vanished and he heard nothing. Even though Maki barely seemed to be there, her hidden power jolted Lumia's rest, like a royal-level intuition snapping awake. Rate kicked off a restoration ritual, calmly telling Lumia that Maki's condition could be fixed fast. Even though Maki came back to life, she just wouldn't respond, leaving Lumia stunned as she frantically tried to jog her memory with words. Toe cracked the case, triggered the stored memory, and blasted Maki's last words, replaying them inside Lumia's quarters. Those shocking recordings proved it all, right down to Maki spotting the weird mattress anomaly hiding under the stacked bedding. With a thunderous jump onto the mattress, Lumia set off a brutal chain reaction that blasted it straight into the sky. Joy burst from Lumia as she bounced on the steady bed. After days of misery, she finally got real, perfect rest. Watching the playback, she finally understood that Maki had taken every hit without her knowing, and she blurted out a truly heartfelt apology. Lumia, flushed with embarrassment, slammed the door shut and swore she'd stop any more misunderstandings with Rate before they ever happened again. She felt safer and proudly bragged that his Rate couldn't spike again, yet his curiosity still hadn't fully vanished. While Maki was rolling around, she accidentally set off something, and boom, she ends up in a weird, unexpected moment hiding under the bed. As she tumbled, Lumia snapped her gaze to Rate, and in that instant their connection hit a jolt, tense, sharp, and suddenly unsure. She got blindsided, and for a second she couldn't even think. His sudden question about what they'd do tomorrow threw her completely off balance. When Lumia asked for a tour, Rate gently reached out for her hand, and that perfectly timed request caught her off guard. With gratitude burning in her chest and doubt clawing at her mind, she admitted that her father's orders were trapping her inside the palace. Even with that smile on her face, the crushing weight of work pressure pinned her down, and she quietly acknowledged it to herself. Raid's bold declaration shuts Lumia up, his unshakable confidence cutting right through her hesitation. He swore he'd meet her at dawn, and with that promise he kicked their whole outing into motion. She watched him vanish into the distance, and then she breathed out his words herself, shaky with doubt, but clinging to a bright hope for whatever tomorrow would swing her way. Raid's presence made Lumia blush like crazy, and when Maki teased her, she panicked. Then she accidentally set off the alarm. In a moonlit cave, a mysterious figure lurked in the distance, clutching strange fragments and whispering that satyrs were the key. Amid crumbling battle ruins, a ruthless figure sneered at their fallen allies' failed escape. He clenched the crushing remains in his fist, admiring the enemy's raw power while his heart ached to finally step into the fight. Even though he was hooked, he slammed the brakes on a fight, afraid the enemy's technique would end the exact same way. He tilted his head to the sky, smirking, like destiny had a leash on them, and sooner or later their paths would collide. Beneath that sacred glow, he stays seated, eyes distant, clinging to the vow that keeps them protecting what must never ever be taken. Ancient runes flared to life around him, roaring like a verdict as they announced his goal: wipe out the heretic completely. Lumia burst into the lively town, grinning so wide you could feel her freedom in the air, like her joy finally had room to run. Suddenly, a distant figure lurched into view and Lumia froze on the spot, sensing something off in every shaky step. Sharp and wide-eyed, she trailed right behind him, grilling him as he figured out how to get the king's permission. Rate, now playing the role of her knight escort, pressed her to cloak her royal status while they traveled. She shot out a quick apology, then pushed onward with burning determination, determined to pry the truth from her father's reason for that approval. Lumia pictured Rate winning his way in by fighting her in a fierce duel just to break past her overprotective royal father's wall. Her dreamy fantasy snapped instantly. Raid leaned in and confessed he'd lied just to mess with her. They strolled into the market like they owned the place, and the moment they passed, a vendor spotted Lumia and shouted to them with a big, happy grin. Lumia soaked up warm hugs and loud praise from the locals, while Ritas silently watched all the attention from the side. The crowd surged in fast, peppering Lumia with desperate questions about the castle and whether the kingdom's future was even safe. Myra lunged in fast, snapping at the panicked crowd before everything could spiral out of control. She jabbed her ladle at him and snapped, "Raid, keep Lumia locked down, do it right or you're going to pay." Lumia stepped forward, voice steady as she faced everyone, telling them the king had restored peace. Some people still can't believe they'd let her go out there with barely any protection after everything that nearly got her. All those doubts crumbled the moment they remembered the king had locked down safety inside the kingdom and even beyond its walls. They learned to recognize the power of public trust, because rulers have to show strength and steady stability, plain as day. Lumia's natural charm and sunny grin quietly lifted everyone's spirits way more than even the worried citizens expected. Those harmless fruits weren't so innocent. He made sharing look casual, but it was a smart power move to calm the politics. At the palace, the king brooded in silence, pacing like a storm cloud, still terrified he might not be able to trust that Lumia would be okay. Meanwhile, Lumia and Rate kept rolling down the road with bright smiles, charming everyone they met, scratching behind dogs' ears, and slipping past nosy officials without getting caught. Crowds leaned in, watching Lumia savor her treat, while Rate squinted at a suspicious-looking black drink. They burst into a grand cathedral, and Lumia beamed as she introduced it as the beating heart of the Massey's church. Instead of sightseeing, Rate led Lumia inside and cut straight to his real mission, though he warned that getting it all across would take a long, serious talk. Inside the church walls, a secret meeting erupted. An unknown noble demanded a rate for a covert mission. The conversation swerved to Duke Graysel, his name alone sounding like a clue to secret power and maybe even royal blood beneath it. Prince Kosis was grinning like everything was fine, but whispers hit hard. Duke Gressel had secretly masterminded the palace infiltration. Doubt clung to his words as Rate demanded proof, convinced the accusations were just personal grudges in disguise. Even with no solid proof, the noble snapped that Grazel was guilty, then demanded the rate for assassination services. Raid snapped his approval on the spot, not giving a damn about morality, only laser-focused on whether killing his target would pay off for him. He didn't care about anyone's motives. He clung to Massey's kingdom's strategic value and started wiping out every last trace he could find. If King Laios was judged unfit, people might pull out terrifying stability plans, assassination included. Before he even agreed to act, Rowlett pressed harder, shoving questions into the man's face and daring him to doubt Grazel's guilt. The client cracked up, admitting their insight was razor-sharp, and that there was way more hiding behind the request. He warned that one forbidden thing, so deadly it deserves death, had to be snuck away and retrieved, no witnesses, no noise, just stealth. Then the name dropped, ***, Guardian Scepter ***, and curiosity exploded in the air, because even Raid hadn't ever heard of anything so powerful. Rate snapped his head to the side, totally thrown off by the whole incident, while Lias insisted it was a kingdom, name and all, dragging an old, historic tragedy right into the light. Inside a sacred temple, 8 clergy were mysteriously cut down, and the worst part, there wasn't a single physical wound anywhere. That deadly poison didn't just fail, it vanished into thin air like it was never there, and only the noble Grau family held the alchemical know-how to pull off an assassination like that. Lias broke down its power, and that cursed artifact supercharged every single citizen, boosting their abilities by about 20% like a terrifying gift from hell. Even the mightiest relics only boost 200 people by a measly 3%, and that completely destroys all logic. Lias didn't just brush it off, he made it crystal clear that this staff was unmatched, even if the relics looked ordinary to everyone else. Out of every sacred relic ever made, the Guardian staff stood at the absolute pinnacle. When it vanished, the Massey's church collapsed into grief. After that, even the mighty Sarks wouldn't dare move too fast. Raid clocked the truth, those scenes with Sarks weren't random at all. Someone terrifying was pulling every string from the shadows. He swallowed his doubts, took on the job, and plunged straight into the Grawl family to dig up the buried truth. Rate chased after Lumia straight into the grand sanctuary, and right at the center loomed a massive statue. She unveiled the statue as the sacred image of the goddess Mrs., a deity worshipped by countless followers. Lumia broke down what the relic truly meant, while Rate stayed quiet and obsessively examined the fake guardian staff. Out of respect, Lumia urged Rate to offer a prayer. Maybe the ritual would unlock answers he couldn't find on his own. They obeyed with heavy reluctance, only to suddenly feel a mysterious voice latch onto his very thoughts. A mysterious shrine paid tribute to Sark's defeat, and everyone showed their gratitude with bizarre, mechanical religious images. As he prayed, a crystal-clear voice broke through, right through his direct connection to the church. Rate snapped at the goddess for taking too long to answer, and the divine figure flinched into an awkward, painful reaction. Instead of snapping with anger, she confessed the truth. Her strength wasn't there, and she couldn't stand beside him when it mattered most. Her hands shook as she begged, "Don't leave me," desperate to finally be understood, even after everything she'd messed up before. Raid stayed locked in prayer as odd plush creatures circled him, cheering him on with goofy smiles but real heart. As the transmission raged on, spiritual interference wouldn't let up, leaving Rape to doubt the goddess as her divine bond started to fray. With no time to waste, he demanded answers. Was the stolen guardian staff hidden somewhere in Graal's estate? Rage flooded her. She blamed her shattered faith on a single culprit, the thief who snatched her relic. Long ago, she ruled as the most worshipped deity, pouring divine power into forging that godlike staff. While other gods crumbled away beneath Messeral's rise, she clung to one truth. This staff was the only thing holding her fading divinity together. His brutal remark hit her like a punch. While she'd been stuck forging a relic, the enemy swept in and took control without even anyone noticing. Her past strength threw up major questions, like sure, she hid and crafted in secret isolation, but what else was she doing? If we recover the staff, the divine power will flood back, so the goddess gave a shaky yes, her voice trembling with barely hidden desperation. Fresh out of that moment, Rate and Lumia calmly set off, already knowing their next stop the second the divine exchange was done. Lumia snapped with frustration, catching the sharp hint of sarcasm in the air, then she forced her cool back into place fast. Despite the silence, she knew deep down that Raid's actions weren't duty at all but pure kindness, and she let a warm, gentle smile bloom across her face. He made it crystal clear, assassins aren't heroes, and his mission was never about doing what's good. Wind ripped across the valley as Raid spun away, eyes distant, while Lumia shouted his name. Cradling that eerie black fruit in her hands, she looked at him with real sincerity and thanked him for giving her this peaceful moment. Lumia couldn't stop thinking about how she once swore the peaceful days in town would never end. The latest events shattered her world. She saw the crushing power looming over the kingdom, and it forced her to question everything she'd ever believed. Even if they branded him evil, someone had to keep the peace. And it sure as hell wasn't someone else, it was the man standing right next to her. Embarrassment crashed over her the second she realized she'd spoken so boldly. Then she started freaking out, replaying every word and wondering how he might read them. He took the fruit she offered with a casual bite, then blurted out that it wasn't nearly as sweet as he'd hoped. Rate told him, "If I ever need something, I'll ask, and you'll save me a spot no matter what." Lumia broke into laughter as they walked, clowning his offer the whole way, yet he shut it down hard, swearing he wouldn't give a single discount. A carriage thundered past the border and into Garachi territory, and even its armored escorts couldn't stop the nervous stares from snapping toward it. Lumia leaned out, buzzing with excitement, only to realize she'd stumbled onto a hidden pocket even the local soldiers didn't recognize. Even with Goldo warning her, Lumia stepped out anyway, swearing she only had one mission: deliver the thing she came to Rate. She swore it had been a full week since they last heard from him, then promised she'd come back fast right after the delivery. At last, their carriage rolled up just before the massive new alchemy workshop. Its grandeur made Lumia's eyes shine with pure awe. Lumia stared in awe at the finished structure, while Goldo swore it couldn't possibly have stood here just 3 days ago. They tore through the estate, eyes wide, stunned by the massive blacksmithing, then realized they were staring at an entire alchemy workshop tucked under the same roof. Suddenly, this weird magical creature popped into view, plump, mustachioed, and made of gears, leaving Lumia staring in stunned confusion and panic. Goldo snapped the truth into place. This creature was Rate's, so everyone finally eased up, but Lumia still looked uneasy as it clambered up onto her head. Meanwhile, Rate was already gone, and a shadowy agent slipped his contact the full rundown, maps in hand and intel about the noble's residence. A noble got a sealed letter handed straight to a Rate messenger, demanding the royal archives retrieve a specific item. Even with his doubts, Rate swallowed his pride and took the mission. The noble promised it was close, just tucked away where nobody could see it. He hesitated, then spun to go, while the noble called out farewell words, wishing him nothing but success. Tucked into a quiet alley, Ray spotted the Mark Cafe and slipped inside with zero trust, moving cautiously like something was about to go wrong. Inside the dim hideout, two men stepped forward and bowed hard, already knowing exactly who Rate was the moment he arrived. Raid thundered down the stairs, and the two men bowed right after, apologizing with raw sincerity for the trouble they'd caused before. Someone pointed to the sorcerer Sathark's incident and with a stern, straight face, confirmed the Rate suspicion for real. They warned the danger was almost knocking at the royal throne, and that's when they picked Raid to shut it down. Even though Rate swore he was only there for the map, they still promised full support for his mission. If he ever asked for it, both of them would rally to his side, using every ounce of strength and loyalty they had. He shot down the extra help, said the map was all he needed, and declared he'd head out alone. Curious, they press for answers, and Rate's choice hits like a decision way bigger than mere personal taste. They argued that the assassination wouldn't be brute force, it needed razor-precise teamwork, so this time they relied on tiny squads and cut the job down to exact information gathering. He smirked at the idea of 3 people, but even then, trust wasn't something he ever handed out easily. He didn't even look back, he dropped the truth like a bomb. This wasn't about trust at all, it was something way deeper, and he couldn't explain it. A cloaked figure slipped out of the shadows and everyone froze, because Raid had already sensed him the moment he stepped in. They stared, stunned that Raid had caught it, and grilled him on how he knew. Then he answered before the door even cracked open. Calda surged forward, flames roaring as he unveiled his razor-sharp assassination technique, then waited for the ratings, no hesitation, not a single doubt. But right in the middle of his stance, his body seized up mid-motion, freezing the room and leaving everyone completely baffled by the sudden paralysis. Even Calda froze, his weapon slipped from his grip, his hand shaking, because some unknown force had completely seized his body and locked him in place. Calda snapped the situation back under control, thrusting her arm up and shouting for everyone to check the ceiling above them. Right then, right there. At first doubt crawled in, but Rate stayed cool and told them, relax, no trap, we're just watching. A sneaky spider-like device dropped from above, and those same strings had already frozen everyone into paralysis during the demonstration. Raid snapped his fingers and with razor-sharp control, he killed the assassin trap before it could fire again. Everyone froze in place. If Raid had wanted them dead, nobody would have lived through that encounter. Raid shot the group a stern warning, demanding they beef up their defenses before he'd even let them join the mission. He straightened his cap with pure resolve, then demanded the map, starting the operation solo. After an urgent royal transport mission, a formal briefing hit them next, because timing was everything for their intelligence exchange and their razor-thin escape window. Once he grasped how deadly this was, Rate swallowed the fear, accepted the job, and strode off, trusting everyone had handed him the whole burden. Later on, one of his subordinates blurted that their hidden spot had been exposed, and Rate just calmly pointed out the disguised surveillance device. At last, they nailed down the disguised magical device. Turns out it wasn't just hidden, it was built to slaughter intruders. He broke down how you've got to hide both your looks and your magical signature if you want to slip through crowds with flawless stealth. He used a tiny mechanical spider to reveal how those hidden traps mirror the exact cold focus of professional assassins. While everyone else guessed at fancy detection tools, Rate calmly swore that trained eyes were all it took to spot every hidden thing. The squad was ordered to rip the device apart piece by piece, then map out how it was built, how it worked, and what was going on inside. Doubts swirled through the team, but the Rate bulldozed ahead, fully sure the results would stay locked in no matter what. A quiet goodbye lingered in the air and hope burned in Rate's words. she'd pray they'd both get stronger before fate throws them together again. Walking there all alone, he couldn't stop hoping their next meeting would finally showcase sharper stealth and honed skills. That brutal competition lit a fire in them, pushing their rate to hit success harder than ever, so they'd smash expectations and meet the mission standards. Even while I was still stunned, unease kept rising, because that device's control thread felt way too invasive, like some unseen force was yanking my strings. People started guessing whether the rate's power could match the Sadarks and level mages, but even they couldn't pin it down for sure. Elsewhere, a countdown candle was burning down to nothing. If the rate didn't come back in time, the countdown would kill it and they'd be forced to withdraw. Uncanny candles popped up all over the place, but they refused to burn any light. So people started whispering that something about their purpose and shape just didn't add up. Up close, I could see wispy threads dangling off them, so it hit me fast. Those candles weren't real at all, they were crafted fakes. Raid burst onto the scene, snapped the interference to a stop and barked a warning not to touch a thing, because his creations demanded total respect and zero secrets getting out. Rate rushed back to the base and Lumia greeted him with open warmth, then clocked the brand new outfit that didn't match anything he'd worn before. While everyone else drilled combat skills, suspicions started buzzing about what he really did for a living, because he chased research, sharpened his tools, and obsessed over perfect assassination synergy. Even with worry still gnawing at everyone about Lumia showing up, she boldly marched forward and insisted on delivering Raid's official reward for finishing their duties. Sadark had piled up massive resources for the temple build, so the workshop kept churning forward without a single stop. But when the chests finally popped open, they didn't just give you stuff, they spilled rare, gleaming jewels that blew past every expectation. After the earlier support was acknowledged, the rest stepped up and handed over rare magic stones, thanking everyone for everything the royal court owed them. These resources didn't just help, they let him revamp his workshop with upgraded magical infrastructure, like he'd finally unlocked the real tools he'd been missing. Right before they took off, Lumia's escort hurriedly asked for one last rate relay thanking the king and ordered everyone to get ready to depart. Her gaze clung to the candle as she hesitated, because she could feel it. He'd vanished on another high-risk mission and he didn't even bother telling anyone. Without a single real reason, Lumia blurted out this eerie feeling like a storm was creeping back in, ready to ruin everything again. Lumia beamed and waved goodbye as she left, and Rate answered her with a calm nod, silent but crystal clear. He stared as the carriage swallowed the night, then turned back and disappeared alone into the deep shadows of his workshop. When he finally arrived, he tore through the old test results, then barked orders to move forward with material batch fay. Machinery snapped to life in perfect sync, gears churning and towering containment tubes looming inside the facility's high-tech core. With every magical tool already set and ready, he gave the final nod and burst into the next task without wasting a second. They checked the materials were ready, then made a calm but final choice: tomorrow at nightfall they'd move. Grazel Manson perched on the cliff, while a knight stood guard over his lord, never letting up, not even for a breath. The Duke snapped into full panic, screaming that a deadly assassin, one who once murdered the mighty warlord Tartarus, was back. Fear slammed into him and he swore that tomorrow he'd escape the country, survive now, then come back only when it's safe. A colossal blast ripped through the street, and the Duke just barely slipped out before a sudden magical strike nailed the ground. Sword flashed free, this knight boldly confronted the trembling Duke, daring him to lose control and start sending missions that weren't his to command. The knights charged ahead, but the commander snapped up his hand and stopped them dead. Hold back. Realizing he'd messed up, the Duke bowed and apologized with all his heart, admitting he'd totally underestimated the deadly warrior, Rayla snapped him back to the mission at hand, and he seized control of the Mrs. Kingdom. No more screw-ups, not one. With a calm voice that somehow felt deadly, he promised the Duke would never be touched, because as long as Rayla stayed close, no assassin would ever make it through. Even with security cranked up, the Duke couldn't shake his fear, because every new hire could still be an enemy assassin wearing a perfect disguise. Magical traps ringed the estate, turning every attempt to slip in into a nightmare, even for top-tier professional assassins. Even so, those defenses still couldn't hold a candle to the kick-ass magic barriers Tartarus built back in the day. Doubt gnawed at him, but he still swore every single day that the surveillance was running, right on schedule, exactly as the Rawguard Empire demanded. Inside the vault, Tartarus forged an unbreakable seal to lock away something so deadly that letting it out would have spelled disaster. Far from the estate, a shadowy figure burst out of the sea, dripping and soaked, but totally fine, then glided in without a sound, like it knew it was being watched. Raid slipped ashore near the jagged coast, barely making a sound as he stared at the crushing magical defenses waiting ahead. Above the shoreline, glowing orbs and savage magic mines clustered into a barrier so tight it beat even the first report's expectations. The final gear check was locked in, and right before the infiltration kicked off, someone slid the coded device into his hands. This hit was aimed straight at Duke Razzle. He was set to blast off for the Roguldal Empire by tomorrow. By poring over satellite data, Rate pinpointed the estate's exact seaside position and proved that deadly, trap-laced forest ringed the perimeter. Directly sneaking in through the sea was a dead end. No matter how hard they broke the defenses, they still couldn't get in from the cliffside. Along the land routes, guards flood the roads in tight patrols, rotating in layers to form a brutal force bigger than 600 strong. He dodged a direct showdown, snapped into stealth mode, and admitted to himself, straight-up fighting wasn't his gift as a support specialist. This time he didn't set traps. He struck with cold, calculated timing, and the estate stayed wide open for him. A sudden, chilling noise ripped through the estate, and the nearby soldiers snapped to attention at once, proving Rate's quiet suspicion was spot on. Surveillance caught a horrifying presence creeping by the estate, one of Masalizal's god-blessed followers, a disciple. Even though the details were buried, Lias told Grazel's story. He'd swiped the keystone and somehow grabbed equal guardianship to match. Suspicion roared to life. Why had Goddess Mrs. ever said something this critical about the existence of disciples? Raid pieced it together. There had to be a second disciple posted there, wielding magic that matched a top-tier magic swordsman. Finishing the mission with nothing but tools felt impossible, because that creature was guarding the estate like it owned the place. A secret magical doorway popped into view, and Raid snapped into action, deploying his scanning tool to map what was hiding inside. Scans uncovered a magic-powered escape dock, engineered to crush underwater blasts during emergency evacuations. Ray knew opening the entrance could ring the alarm, so he ditched it and slipped away with a distraction package instead. The guards stayed oblivious, calmly calling in that every sector along the estate's southern perimeter was clear. They checked it twice, found zero weirdness, and sent the patrols right back out, certain the earlier noise was just a random accident. Guards sweep the forest edge under the quiet night sky, scanning everything with steady eyes and calmly calling out that there's nothing strange out there. A weird insect-like creature snaps open and blasts poison into the air, while the patrol soldiers under the trees pass by without even noticing. The gas is packed with engineered fibers meant to do more than harm. It steals your edge, dulls your awareness, and drags your reactions just enough to miss the moment. Poison slips through the air without a sound, leaving the soldiers awake but clueless, so their routine reports keep rolling on like nothing happened. As he hits the device, the assassin double-checks. No enemy so much as senses him, and his whole infiltration stays razor-sharp invisible. From the treetop, the insect drone swept its sensors across the battlefield for soldiers, and the agent pinpointed the installation's exact spot. He lifted a canister device and tightened the mechanism just right, priming it to blast that chemical fog everywhere. The guarded building finally loomed ahead, but the brutal wind and open exposure made getting closer way too risky, at least for now. Mechanical birds swooped overhead, scanning the last defense line where about 15 elite sentries stood ready to hold the line. Among the knights, one stood out like a nightmare, so seasoned and razor alert that no plain disguise or basic magic could ever fool a soul. Several guards suddenly dropped without warning, and the whole area erupted into panic as the others rushed to stare at the silent threat. In the middle of the chaos, one knight spotted an arrow stuck in a soldier's bare, unarmored shoulder. Alarm blared the moment it happened. Orders shouted to stay razor alert at all costs, because sniper fire was spotted just beyond the perimeter and nobody knew who was behind it. Urgent orders crashed into headquarters. Everyone snapped into action to hunt down that hidden enemy shooter, right now. Frantically shouting into his device, the commander demanded an answer from the now-dead Southwest Area 1. Disguised in armor, the infiltrator dodged shattered rubble and slipped past surveillance to track down the guarded magical signal. Suspicion ignited the moment the guards spotted mismatches, their appearance recognition failing, and the tension snapped tight in an instant. Once his identity collapsed, he bolted through the corridor with no time to breathe, just a frantic retreat. Through a battlefield of fallen guards, he charged straight into the hidden chamber, where the stolen National Protection Corps was stashed away. Spells snapped to life the moment he spoke, defensive magic blasting out as he braced himself, ready to slam into the impact of those level 4 enchanted mirror barriers. If it were physical, anyone could have picked the lock, but the magic inside clenched down hard, shutting out any simple tampering or bypass. Rate snapped his focus onto the magic user's structure, and while they still missed it, he clocked their weak spots, setting himself up with priceless prep time. It's a triple-layer fortress, part magic, part steel, so you don't just smash your way in, you've got to disarm every lock with surgical precision. Pinpointing the cracks in enchanted bonds was the only way. Only sharp, targeted blows could sever those embedded connections for good. All around the lock, Obalkrin hugged the scene, an enchanted alloy forged to shrug off nearly every form of physical damage and magic. He sealed every joint with auric halcum, and all the weak spots vanished, turning this lock into something almost impossible to break. Great slammed into advanced forging and expert crafting, pouring specialized alchemy into the spellwork to break through that tangled enchanted design. Shin shouted the focus chant and magic erupted, fully activating his ultimate move, Enhanced Morph Henshin. Power surged at his command point as glowing glyphs erupted, smashing through the barriers guarding the enchanted vault. Explosive pulses ripped through the layered magical structure as it finally started to crumble at those razor-precise internal disruption points. A blinding glow blasted upward as the Rate lifted the artifact. Right there, in the light, the Guardian's stolen staff was revealed. A radiant staff slammed down from the sky, stopping Rate mid-step as its divine, overwhelming power crushed the air around him. Sensing how dangerous it was, Rate steadied his breath as mana thundered through his body. Ignoring every warning, he snatched the staff, then pain vanished into silence, leaving behind a cold, creepy stillness he'd never felt before. Instead of throwing him off, the staff moved in perfect sync, shutting down the imbalance like they were reading the same core rhythm. Suddenly, the world flickered into pixels and a weapon locked dead onto him. Before he could even react, his staff sprang to life on its own, firing without his say-so. And Rates confirmed the target was close, then he calmly triggered contingency, Plan B, the covert move. 8. The fortress shattered into chaos. One subordinate dropped to his knees and begged to be set free, swearing he had to go face the intruder right now. Refusing to let him slip away, the guards tangled into a brutal argument, convinced the enemy was trying to cut their leader off from everyone. In their wild imaginations, Rate got blown up into a crazed, unpredictable monster, one mission in its heart: destroying that vault. But that silver-haired noble read the situation differently. The vault wasn't locked down with weapons at all, it was guarded by boundary magic. Guard barked the moment he spotted the intruder brandishing the staff, and one guy immediately pushed forward, yelling that it was his turn. Magic barriers exploded into shards, panic surged as the Rate stayed unnervingly calm, all while dust roared up and the enemies froze in shock. Both warriors stared each other down, instantly clocking who they were, no words needed as their battle instincts erupted on contact. A blinding light exploded into the air, soldiers reeled backward, dazed and stumbling, and as they tried to find their footing, Rate slipped away without a fight. A sharp warning snapped through the air. One single look was enough to make them crumple, and every fighter immediately scrambled to block the crushing magical force bearing down on them. Gressel studied the device's rate of fire, then it hit him. It was wasting nothing, blasting paralytic needles with razor-sharp surgical precision. Even after the vault got ripped apart, Gressel refused to believe raw power was the whole story, so he pressed for the Rate to spill everything. From a hidden spot, he watched and measured in silence. Then his jaw dropped because Grussel's speed was faster than even the Night Wrassel. As Grossel charged in, the protective wards caved in on themselves, and the moment a glowing sigil flared, doves exploded outward, snatching the soldiers' attention in an instant. With aerial escape, Rate bolted off the battlefield and Grussel struck right back, unleashing crystal shards with ruthless speed and zero hesitation. Footsteps hammered through the forest as Rate clocked his pursuer one, then watched him rip through the birds barehanded. Gressel surged into view, his massive blade crackling with raw energy, and he demanded answers about where the sacred staff was born. No words were needed. One glance at Grussel's overwhelming aura was enough to show it smashed every swordsman he'd faced before. Trapped in a maze of illusions and hidden snares, Rate crept forward with ruthless caution. One reckless move, and a single, seasoned hit would have wiped him out instantly. His magic output blew past his own by thousands, and Raid's assassination methods were already dissected down to the last detail. Without warning, Rate blasted a hidden command and Garzel stared, totally clueless about what trick was about to hit him. Then a gigantic eruption tore through the battlefield, blinding light swallowed everything, so Grassel snapped to a stop and had to rethink his next move. That crushing force couldn't promise him a win, because Rate pulled the strings, luring him into this trap-filled battleground where every move and countermove decided who walked out standing. Racing across blasted ground, he hurdled upended barriers and falling beams, while the Rate unleashed ruthless magic-suppressive fire that never missed. Confusion exploded as Grassel sank underground and disappeared. People scrambled everywhere, while the Raiders' tools kicked on, ready to fire up for the final phase. Grossel's eyes went wide as lightning slammed down, then he snapped his gaze to Rate's, frozen in place with his staff locked like a weapon. Wraith unleashed his deadliest trap. Then the ground ripped open beneath Grossel and a soul shatter detonated right where he stood. Grosso barely slipped out alive and Rate couldn't believe it. How in the world could anyone dodge something like that with timing that razor sharp? The numbers clocked a 0.53-second reaction. Either detection magic was playing games, or Grassel's instincts were downright inhuman. He stayed completely baffled. This level of soul magic was never supposed to exist, and it definitely wasn't rumored to be a trap. Grasso burst out laughing, then slammed his blade into the ground, like he just pulled the rug out from under everyone, ending things way too fast. Raid kept his guard up. Grassel's sudden surrender screamed something was off, like it was a trick meant to buy time. Grassel paused, then admitted he genuinely admired Rates. Those tactics blew him away so much he started to rethink the whole plan to kill such a deadly assassin. After the invitation came in, Grassel leaned in and urged Rate to ditch his kingdom and team up with their superior faction. They trade names, Grassel becoming Rilius, and then that resolute Rate flips to the one last push they've got left. But when their motives split, only one thing stays crystal clear: Rilius is hunting dominance. Scans the battlefield, studies the enemy's data in real time, and times the perfect counterattack down to the second. Without so much as taking a step, he triggered a secret function and flicked a remote-controlled blade through the air like it was nothing. The skill-only swordsman launched his weapon into a mid-air spin, then aimed it straight at his enemy's back. His enemy snapped back instantly, blasting a massive surge of lightning straight at Raid's position. The moment the attack hit, the ground tore open in a violent roar. Raid barely slipped out of the dead center impact zone. Lightning tore through the battlefield, ripping the land and sky apart and leaving nothing behind but scorched, blackened ruins. Explosions thunder along the coast as the sea rips open, and panic detonates inside the defensive outpost's walls. A commander screamed orders as soldiers scrambled, and the moment they saw the destruction spreading, helplessness hit them like a wave. In a far-off city, people felt the ground shake and panicked like invasion was seconds away, while they had no idea the threat was literally right behind it all. Among the watchmen, a few clocked that the sound-suspecting Rates were behind it, while the streets filled up fast, crowds packed in, panicking, confused, and trapped in the middle of the chaos. Princess Lumia burst out of the hall, calm on the surface but brimming with grit, as lantern light carved pure determination into her face. She snapped out swift orders, rallied the knights to guard the civilians, and pushed everyone to safety before the next tremors slammed down again. Guards sprinted to follow her every order as villagers crowded in, and the tension kept climbing while the princess stayed locked in and fully in control. Lumia whispered to herself as she stared at the coast, praying with all her heart that everyone would stay safe in the chaos. Far off in the distance, A silver-haired man stared at the smoldering forest, seething that his surprise strike had totally missed. The enemy clocked the discarded weapon tactic, caught what it was trying to do, and sneered at how painfully obvious it looked the moment anyone looked closer. Rate calmly slid a hidden blade free, already measuring every angle and reading the enemy's awareness like he'd predicted it all. Then the rabbit companion's magic interference lit up the senses like a warning flare, proving that the stealth assault plan had been spotted. The swordsmen stared down the tangled misdirection and realized this wasn't a random foe at all. It was one of Merce's kingdom's elite. Sensing magical energy surging from the capital, he snapped his gaze to the horizon, because reinforcements were already racing in. Shock thundered through him as he shot forward, blasting out a relentless storm of explosive impact strikes. He finally clocked it. Those reinforcements were a decoy ripping troops away from the real target just long enough to be too late. He tore through the sky, yanked out his comm device, and punched in urgent magic codes to make it burst to life. Lightning crackled around him as he reached for a counterattack. Then Raid exploded onto the scene and intercepted every move with terrifying, laser-precise magic. Energy tore up into the sky as Raid detonated a destructive spell, swearing his magical gear could never be broken. Missiles thunder out of the sky as glowing magical towers roar to life, shoving the enemy into a desperate, full-on defensive retreat. From far away, he sensed a massive artifact getting yanked through space and dropped straight toward the noble's estate. He didn't hesitate for a second. He blasted energy through his arm and lunged to strike before the thing could disappear. A massive orb burst into existence in midair, channeling dark magic for domination while ancient runes flared over the battlefield. Imperial knights swooped in on winged mounts, their command spears blazing as they kicked off a crushing counterattack to smash the enemy's deployment. A portal snapped open, and urgent orders blared to pull out the noble before the reinforcements could arrive. As he tried to make his break, his item box snapped shut out of nowhere, unveiling a nasty trap meant to cripple his magical gear. An armored figure slammed into the scene, roaring that the battlefield was cut off. No calls, no backup, just one brutal choice: win and live or lose and die. Locked inside a sealed arena, Rate suddenly realized someone had yanked the plug on most of his magical tools, leaving them useless. Even with the odds stacked against him, he tightened his grip, flashed a confident smirk, and started mapping out the quickest route to victory. Rate and his foe hover midair, got hemmed in as a blazing crystalline barrier snapped into existence from overwhelming magical power. He clamps his grip on his blade, the truth hitting hard. Without access to his item box, a frontal assault is straight-up impossible. The enemy smirks with confidence, raises a towering wall out of thin air, and laughs at the fact that his opponents have no magical tools to fight back. Even with the rules begging them not to cheat, the masked enemy straight-up admits it. Only the strongest walks out alive of this rigged Colosseum showdown. He can't shake the suspicion, what's the point of these rules? Because this duel feels like a disguise for an assassination plot lurking underneath. The masked warrior sneers at the old ways, spitting on loyalty and clinging to his raw personal strength ideology like it's the only truth that matters. Great watched in silence, feeling something off beneath his opponent's wild swagger and loud, over-the-top act. A lightning-fast flash tears it open and instinct kicks in like a weapon, because deep inside that barrier's surge, something vital is being kept just out of reach. Electricity snaps through the air as the enemy finally drops the talk and charges forward. This is where the real battle kicks off. With overwhelming power in his grasp, he dashes in first, slamming into Rate with a blinding electric rush that tears everything apart. Raids hit the barrier and the response felt wrong. Then the clones burst outward, each one copying his deadly strike pattern like a perfect nightmare. Still airborne, he twisted out of the way and snapped a lightning cross slash so close it just barely skimmed past its mark. Lightning-like shockwaves ripped open the sky as both warriors rocketed higher, weaving through a hail of magical projectiles. He landed clean and snapped right back, throwing a counterattack that clashed head-on with the charged strike. Sparks erupted as his blades met lightning in a violent burst. A thunderous surge ripped out of his technique, forming a beast-shaped blast that slammed into his enemy, catching them totally off guard. At last, flames spiraled around him as the enhanced ritual snapped on, priming his body to unleash sheer destruction. A colossal fire dragon erupted from the sky, blasting downward with a violent crash, and terrifying, world-melting power surged inside its blazing coils. Then the enemy clashed head-on, bracing against the raging flame surge as Rate pushed even more power forward. The dragon's jaws yawned open, and as the strike slammed closer, scorching heat and crackling lightning twisted together like a living storm. Clashing auras lit the battlefield, and rage charged forward as twin dragons roared behind him in perfect sync. Inside the barrier, two elemental beasts crashed together, thunder roaring and flames surging, hammering the sky with raw, violent pressure. Once the blast finally cleared, fragments of wreckage drifted through the air between them, and there, hanging in the chaos, floated a ripped piece of enchanted armor. When the masked opponent leaned in, they spotted it. Magical glyphs were stitched right into Rate's armored coat. His eyes snapped upward, brushing past the scrap, because what he really feared was already hanging in the shattered sky. Flames erupted again as the pace dropped, and his moves somehow blew past every expectation from their earlier run-ins. The masked enemy kept jeering, demanding to know why a mage's sword skills were so sharp they could rival even the Imperial Knights. He kicked things off by laying out 3 declarations, then the fight ran by the official rules, complete with outside witnesses who made sure everything stayed fair. Rate didn't buy it for a second. He scoffed at the grand title and kept pressing on whether the Knights' alliance was even real. The second and third truths hit fast, and suddenly stalling didn't even matter, because pure evasion still couldn't tip the war's outcome. When the quiet watching finally stopped, he restarted the countdown and zeroed in on the truth, because now he was about to face the answer. 10 years ago, a terrifyingly powerful sage showed Rate and his brother how to wield magic. Back then, Recuse lit up the scene as a rising star, brimming with magical potential no one else could match. Their empire crushed every kind of faith. No gods, no apostles, no religion allowed. Threats from nearby nations shoved everything into chaos, so they forged Raycaz, an artificial apostle, and it still crashed, failing in the end. After everything spiraled out of control, chaos ripped through the land, so to honor Mas Lazul, they burned it all down and hunted for new stars. Recognition hit like a spark. He realized this battlefield wasn't random at all, but a meticulously built replica of Twin Star. A blast ripped through the ground, hurling debris everywhere, while the noble's body lay still, scorched beyond recognition. Then Rape shattered the silence, hinting that all the chaos on the coast might have been the perfect cover for a planned escape. It hit like a hammer. This teleportation magic was never meant to help. It was built for one brutal job, yanking people straight to the shoreline. Even after the noble died, Rate snapped that the whole war was pointless, because from there on out, all that was left was cold retribution for everyone who came after. Raid slammed all his power into his fist and unleashed a brutal strike that shredded the enemy's defenses in an instant. The shockwave slammed them both into a spinning vortex. Magic tore through the air, swirling violently as they hovered on crackling spheres. Oxygen drained fast inside the sealed arena, and as his body started to fail, the enemy just watched unmoved, letting his struggle crawl on. Behind the enemy, a massive army surged forward, roaring with cheers as Raid stood his ground against impossible odds, unleashing blazing power. Even with exhaustion chewing at them, they surged forward with fresh fury, ready to stop the fusion before it finishes. Rape was blasted through dimensional fractures, and his sense of reality lurched wildly with every violent pulse of energy. Even after his magical tool was gone, he felt danger breathing down his neck, then snapped into action with freakish speed and razor-sharp instincts. His movements shattered human limits, his blade carved through non-stop attacks, and afterimages stacked like a blur in the air. The enemy's eyes popped wide as the Rates shot through the roof. Then a sealed device flared, blasting out a wave of crushing magical pressure. An ancient mechanism snapped into Rate's body midair, and right as his eyes opened, power and knowledge ignited together. In midair, a magical construct sprang to life and blasted out rings that warped space, cutting off any straight-shot attacks. Wide, terrified eyes stared as the incoming strike smashed straight through their defenses, pressure and panic flooding in like a wave. A scream detonated through the black smoke, and pure, unfiltered horror surged out of the enemy's very core. He denounced that Rate's very existence, swore divine punishment, and promised ruthless vengeance for shattering the sacred cosmic balance. With zero panic, Rate stood his ground and snapped at the unfair game of power, refusing to let destiny get written by God's rules. He stared at the arena's design like it was a ritual altar, hiding a deeper sacrifice beneath the fight. The enemy refused to back down, unleashing chaotic void energy to wipe Rate clean from existence. Crystal shards exploded out of the void, slicing straight through the enemy with deadly, pinpoint precision. Rattled by the ambush, the foe demanded to know where that deadly attack's space magic came from, or if someone was secretly summoning forces out of thin air. Raid floated there calm as stone, giving nothing away. His silence cranked the enemy's panic and suspicion higher and higher. In reinforced armor, they stood shoulder to shoulder, still as stone, his coat nowhere to be seen, his presence unreadable and downright unnerving. A smug smirk snapped onto his face, and then the symptoms hit, proving the paralytic neurotoxin had finally started to bite. A mysterious avalanche substance crystallized in a flash, then kicked on the moment it hit the bloodstream, shoving everything past the safe limit. Earlier judgment paid off. Those enemies couldn't fight back against a gas-based agent hiding right in front of everyone. Hidden among the failed prototypes, one grim component finally unlocked how toxins, honed through puppet weapon experiments, could spread far and wide. A secret oxygen mask clicked in and it revealed the truth. His coat was where the dispersal material was coming from. The gas had already started pouring out earlier, and before any symptoms could even kick in, he cut off his own manual breathing. Once more, endless memories hit like a storm, showing how Rate's control got stretched into layered lies buried in every single step. Armor everyone swore was unbreakable got shattered from the inside, and his plan played out like a Trojan horse, slipping in unseen and turning the whole defense upside down. 50 grams of refined toxin, at 50,000 times the lethal dose, was a death sentence so brutal that nobody, not a single soul, could survive it. Reality shattered around him as poison and brutal coercion closed in, and his own body screamed in shock, then straight into defeat. Desperate energy surged through him as he roared, blasting chaos with one mission: to swallow everything like a black hole. A blinding blast ripped upward, and as the beast collapsed, it choked out one last prayer to Mas Lazul. He clenched the hilt one more time, pain screaming through him, and steeled himself to unleash his last, deadly technique. A cursed contract burst to life and roaring crimson flames carved an ancient seal. Then those forbidden words unleashed total destruction from deep within. A sacred incantation erupted, and divine judgment came roaring in. Blades clashed loud beneath the rising invocations, the sound echoing through the air. A massive gate tore open overhead, blasting out raw energy that slammed every exit shut on this plane. An enemy jerked back, rage blazing, and erupted into screams, warning everyone that Raid didn't deserve to channel Mas Lazu. In a world chewing on decay and roaring flames, his twisted face finally cracked, softened by the flood of illusions, and he still insisted, "It's beautiful." The poison that drove hallucinations hit, flooding him with wild visions of pure bliss. Then everything shattered into a total collapse. Rate, with the puppet system guiding him, barely dodged a lethal counterstrike in the final heartbeat of the fight. Even as the enemy faltered, a huge power still clung to the air, and the Colosseum shook hard under the last echoes. That tiny token stayed in his hands as he silently thanked the princess, whispering a desperate prayer that he'd make it out alive. Raid clutched his resolve tight and locked the core down, only to realize too late that its spirit had just awakened. Scans verified everything held steady, weapon and wielder stayed safe, as the first sunlight poured back over the silent battlefield. Mission complete, he strolled out through sunlit fields, calm as ever, clutching a relic that marked the end of the battle. A weird mechanical contraption turned up along the route in pieces, baffling every guard and leaving the investigators scratching their heads. Up close, it didn't move much at all, like the motion was just some light trick, working only when transport magic kicked in. Magic, then suddenly every device slammed down way too close to the royal palace, not anywhere near this travel route. Lumia leaned in and scrutinized a single device, convinced it was a trap dressed up to look harmless. Lumia stared back at everything they'd been through and realized, right then, that its magic was exactly what they'd been tapping every time they teleported in a flash. Lumia couldn't contain her excitement as she laid out her plan: display the device as military support and watch the enemy's forces get thrown off balance in an instant. Her excitement crumpled the second the man's silent glare screamed disapproval, and suddenly she couldn't even meet his eyes, timid, uncertain, and stuck. A brutal, powerful figure showed up and tore into Lumia, ripping her apart for ignoring royal orders and for daring to join the advanced team. He spun on Gordo and demanded answers, and the soldiers instantly dropped to a bow, profusely apologizing for failing to stop her. Lumia was reminded, loud and clear, that she wasn't wanted here. She was only there to witness a criminal noble's downfall. She wouldn't let her father carry it all by himself. She stepped up and claimed shared responsibility for whatever happened next. Fresh news hit fast. Enemy warships were coming, shattering the camp and proving their worst invasion fears were right on the money. Then, even with the threat looming, Command insisted the enemy wouldn't make a move, reckless confidence blazing in his grin as he laughed it off. Urgency snapped back as the scouts clocked strange movements, and now the enemy could launch a strike way faster than anyone was ready for. As he stared at the endless sea, doubt kept gnawing at him. Would he ever find the strength to drop this burden when the time came? Once he reached the hidden sanctuary, Raid slipped in under the quiet cover, hunting for the people who were waiting for the king's delivery. 3 robed men stepped in front of him and slammed his path shut, forcing him to spell out his mission, straight from the royal orders. Raid introduced himself cool as ice, then refused to hand over a thing until their identities were officially declared first. His questions detonated inside the priests, so they panicked and blurted out their leader's real name and face, nothing like anyone had expected him to be. Rate realized they hadn't been told what to expect at all, and somehow their secrecy still hit the king's exact standards. Rate brandished the radiant staff and demanded, "Tell me, do you still remember the sacred shape?" They recognized it on the spot, no hesitation at all. It was the legendary national relic, the one everyone swore was lost forever. Tears surged as they knelt. No one ever thought they'd see it come back again in their lifetime. Rate demanded to know where the relics were hidden. Then the elder gave a quiet nod and ushered him down the path. With care in every motion, the sacred staff was finally placed in his hands, sealing the king's mission he'd been trusted to finish. With trembling reverence, the priest lifted the staff and set it on the altar, heart bursting. He'd finally been handed a second chance. When divine energy ripped upward, he swore he'd guard the kingdom, no matter what it cost him, even if it ended his life. Bright lights burst across the capital and everyone froze in place, staring as power snapped back to life, even though they had no clue where that sacred force came from. Elsewhere, a rate analysis of artifact effects lit up the system, transformation precision and speed shot higher, and the results screamed a shocking 20% performance boost. As he stared at the artifact's aura, he knew, no doubt, that it was the exact opposite of destruction's force. With hearts full of gratitude, the priests bowed to Rate and promised their churches would back him for every need that came next. Your payment was already locked in, so don't just ask for coin, ask for influence, because that's what he truly wanted as part of his reward. Not knowing what to ask, he closed his eyes and prayed for clarity first, before he dared to demand anything. Kneeling beside the clergy, he reached out in silence, eyes locked on the heavens, begging for a divine sign with every ounce of hope. Right in the middle of his prayer, an unexpected voice cut in, begging him to hold on, while a divine presence gathered itself to come straight down to him. A radiant woman lounged on sacred steps, waiting for the chosen one as moonlight poured down on her. Rape blinked hard in confusion, stuck on a totally different goddess personality from his earlier chaotic visions. Suspicions flared as Rate matched her face to the memories. Everything lined up, but her aura didn't. Right in the middle of her descent, she stumbled. Suddenly the whole chamber froze in a tangled, awkward hush. Rate snapped on instinct and shoved his companion ahead, sending a shocking move straight into the stumbling goddess's way. She thrust her arms wide, and the goddess burst forth with blinding light, shattering the fake idol that was impersonating her. Power ripped upward, shattering the illusion to pieces. then the broken puppet dropped out of sight, swallowed by a spiral of divine light. Every one of them crumpled to their knees, stunned, speechless, as the silent truth finally took over and exposed the whole lie. Tears burned in their eyes as the believers erupted in joy, because the real goddess had just come back, right in front of them. Behind solemn hands, the strain finally eased, because one more stumble and her image would have shattered completely. In a private space, Rate listened hard as the goddess broke down the communication link and warned him how limited its range really was. Laughing without a care, she struck a playful pose, only to miss the fact that her look was about to clash hard with what the gods demanded. Watching her act, Raid kept it to himself and realized that one more mistake could have shattered her sacred image forever. Unease clawed at her as she begged him to understand, praying her secret personality stayed buried and unseen. His blunt critique hit like a truck, and calling in an assassin just to lose the timing or the guy wasn't exactly a divine move. Rate snapped at her, grilling her about Relias and demanding to know why the most crucial info was hidden from her. Panic exploded across her face the second she remembered that missing detail right in the middle of the transmission, and way too late. Lucky for them, Raid had saved their last conversation on record, ready to pounce on anything important she might have left out. With spiraling dread, she worried she'd shatter the believer's faith, then she practically pleaded with others to help her claw back that lost trust. With her pride choking her, she begged for mercy and offered help in return, pleading in the most painfully awkward position imaginable. A wild misunderstanding spiraled out of control when a stuffed creature took the wrong signal and turned the requests into chaos. Rate made it crystal clear. He wanted to borrow her authority and smash Maisel Azul with the church behind him. She nodded, accepted his request on the spot, and quietly stepped in to help, out of sight, out of reach, while nearby factions tried to meddle. Even after a century of waiting, she admitted the world looked way worse than anyone had dared to imagine. She clocked Maslazul as the enemy, and the moment she did, she exposed the real problem. They were doomed because no apostles were on their side. They floated the idea of making brand new apostles, but the catch was brutal. It would demand a massive sacrifice of human lives. Devout followers stepped forward without a second thought, pledging their final years to back the goddess's divine cause. Visions confirmed it. Relias tossed away an entire night and took death itself to become an apostle. It wasn't random at all. Someone was pulling the strings from the shadows, steering every move behind the scenes. Rates speculated their enemy wasn't pulling any punches, and might even be gearing up to invade foreign nations soon. She valued their loyalty, but she wouldn't trade it away. She refused to be sacrificed because she wanted to stay a goddess people could protect. Instead of forging apostles through death, she chose a powerhouse, someone whose strength matched theirs. In front of the crowd, she raised her hand, pointed at him, and publicly crowned him as her chosen apostolic savior. Gasp after gasp ripped through the crowd as the followers realized Rate had wiped out not one, but two apostles, all in a single week. She formally handed apostolic authority to Rate, ordering the church to follow him faithfully until her return. He was handed secret orders, serve as the divine messenger and carry the apostles' sacred commands to the world. Even with the shock of the role, Rate pushed through and won real power inside the church hierarchy. All alone in the divine realm, he couldn't stop asking himself one terrifying question: was it really wise to hand him that power? Watching her desperation spike, Rate realized a simple rejection could shatter her, and so he tightened his grip, binding her loyalty to his will. She spilled just 1%. The rest, 99%, dropped to their knees and worshipped the rival god's dark order. Water stood his ground at a brutal 1% shot, so he ran the numbers, admitted the fight looked grim, and braced for the worst. Even so, he flashed a wicked smirk, adrenaline surging because the wait was over. This was finally a challenge tough enough to light a real thrill in his chest. She whispered, trembling with hope's weight, asking if victory was even real anymore. Side by side, they ripped apart the defense and declared war. Rates seized victory with cold, unshakable certainty. With assassin-level focus, he unleashed everything, redirecting his very existence to tip the world's balance. 2 weeks slid by after he brought the sacred staff back, and for a short while the Massey's church finally tasted peace again. Alchemic ingredients and rare herbs crowded the table, all piled up for a make-or-break potion round. With the work demanding real care, he urged everyone to stop and talk, right now about what was happening to the group lined up behind him. Leaders nodded along that the home front was steady, but out in the wider world, rising tensions screamed that something bigger was about to blow up. When the inside attacks blew up, everything flipped. Outside forces slammed into action and started cranking the pressure from the outside. The Roncheral theocracy didn't just whisper plans, they showed their military cards, launching troops toward the Mincis kingdom like it was already game time. Among the nations, power came from who ruled, dukes commanded duchies, kings held kingdoms, and high priests ran the theocracies. Ron Tarl threw his faith behind the war god Baisha, because Baisha was a lie built to crush the Messi's worshippers. Old legends warned of something like Radaras, just showing up was enough to wipe out whole armies without mercy. At the exact same time, the Yule Empire launched alliance mobilization, like multiple forces were about to slam into a coordinated, all-out escalation. At the same time, a bunch of followers in Yule pinged the exact same alliance movement, and that intel hit with scary, undeniable credibility like it couldn't wait another second. The Yule Empire stretched right up against Mincis, worshipped the Maslazul faith, and it brutally outclassed Rontal's theocracy, holding its power at the edge and laughing. The Maslazul doctrine banned teaming up with any other religion, so you had to convert to the nation first before alliances were even allowed. When the diplomatic offers finally rolled in, Rate asked Mincis straight up how he planned to answer, speaking for faith. Laius boldly swore the rejection wouldn't happen at all, betting everything on his religious proposal, and on the people sticking with him no matter what. With Messi's blessing on their backs, the citizens rose in faith, and the staff stayed loyal, until this land became the final fortress. Raid stood over that sealed container, staring down a wild vortex that pulsed with unstable divine energy. Even after the whole nation flipped to Maslazul, rumors ripped through the streets, people swore the old Messi's followers were still alive, hiding under the reformed faith. Laius grilled the messenger Messi's envoy, pushing to learn if he'd actually agreed to the alliance or if he was just weighing every option. He crushed his biscuit and snapped out Messi's belief: faith doesn't need sacrifice, especially when others get forced into it. Rate finally seized the terrifying truth: if this is real, then millions are already dead because of this fake god. Rate shut the alliance down cold, calm in voice but iron in will, and he walked out, leaving the room stunned and silent. Leah instantly ditched the ally idea, spinning a new plan on the spot. She pushed for absorbing their neighbor before the coming battle. They all froze, baffled by his choice of words, but Rate made it clear: war, not negotiation. The neighboring kingdom was basically the same size, and if conversion swept through it, it would triple their numbers under the Messi's faith. That nation had crumbled while it was still weak, and the Messi's doctrine swept in, rewriting the old state religion. Only 5 years had slipped by since the conversion, and those hidden Messi's believers were probably still lurking in the crowd. Swapping a lifetime of faith wasn't some easy switch. Most people only wanted to crawl back to the beliefs they'd once sworn to. A bald advisor leaned in and warned, "These leaders are zealots, side with them and you're basically signing your name to their extremist faith." Rate shot back with a chilling answer, then ripped leadership out root and branch, leaving everyone around him staring in outright shock. One wild theory said that if they could drag enough believers back to Messi's, Maslazul's global domination would get totally shut down. Doubt swept in and wiped out the zealots for good, and yeah, it sounded totally bold, but plenty of people still questioned whether that plan could pull off. Killing the core names like Sark might be all it takes, if the power shove plays out the same way it did in past national collapses. Even Rate's own network couldn't get the dirt on their leadership structure. It stayed locked behind classified walls. Laius started mapping the timeline, asking himself just how many assassinations it would take before full-blown war finally burst wide open. If there was just one key target, Rate figured a tight 3-month window could finally slam the conflict shut. The assassination could drag past 3 months, so if trouble hits, delays stack up fast and the body count could skyrocket. Backup plans got the green light, and if resistance dragged on, they readied everything to hold out through a long, brutal war. With aggressive reforms crashing in, their nation knew it wouldn't stay untouched unless it fought back hard and fast. A national emblem granted strategic buffs, supercharging the nation's military, so every force got a massive 20% power boost. Power gaps can blow wide open mid-fight, and if no enemy envoys show up, it looks like victory will be won the hard way, straight through battle. The elixirs were finally finished. He cradled one gently, and a quick check told him it was ready, no explanation needed. In the lore, these elixirs fuse stamina potions with antidotes, so you get a full reset and extra magical resistance on top. This potion didn't just do what it was supposed to, it hid one shocking extra power nobody ever talked about. As a trial, it could bring back lost limbs, and with them, strength that might light a fire under his followers. Without a second thought, the elder grabbed the envoy's elixir and drank it first, like he was born for that honor. Instantly, regeneration kicked in, muscles, skin, and bones snapped back into place while everyone watching stood there, completely stunned as the transformation played out in real time. After decades of silence, that long, low storm rolled back in, blasting everyone with the potion's impossible, world-shattering success. It was supposed to be for NPCs only, but shockingly, the formula healed crushing injuries and handed people back full function in this world. Lumia couldn't help herself, she grilled, "So how strong is it? Like, what spot would a potion like this hit on the potion level charts?" Rate shrugged off the comparison, because to him, trying to put a number on miracles like these just misses the point. Shock slammed into them the moment that level 7 revelation hit. Because this rarity wasn't just unusual, it blew past every potion classification their entire world had ever known. Even the low-tier elixirs were hard to find, and once level 7 potions blew past what whole nations could produce, you could see the observers straight up refuse to believe it. In this world, no one even knew elixirs existed, so that silence only made the mystery deeper and the divine value skyrocket. They pitched it like a miracle drug for bone marrow, claiming it could speed up conversion by curing the incurable. By tying miraculous recoveries to faith, you'd supercharge relic power, sharpen every strategy, and ignite devotion with surgical precision. They threw down over the wording. One elder insisted it should be called preaching, not faith, and they even argued profiting was better to dodge the whole manipulation vibe. They decided Messi's teachings should feel holy and uplifting, not like a business deal, so their followers would trust them spiritually. Misunderstandings could blow up at any moment, so Ryuji immediately asked to be corrected, knowing his grasp of this world was still far from complete. They officially stamped their future with one bold consensus. The potion was divinely inspired by Messi's, and that was the story they swore to. They cranked up mass production of elixirs while everyone else dug into intel and handled logistics. At the same time, master craftsmen crafted potions and gear. Panic hit when people started wondering if they could forge enough magical tools in time to arm the allied forces for the battle. Right before the final preparations, he quietly prayed for a little more time, just enough to make their side stronger. A week later, the Rate's alchemy workshop roared back to life, and the production kept sprinting forward non-stop. Cloaked messengers burst in with urgent letters and sealed warnings spill out. Something big is brewing in the military across the border, and nobody saw it coming. Multiple cities were slammed with surprise attacks overnight, and by the time anyone could even sit down to negotiate, undeclared war had already ignited. Years of brutal prep and potion brewing finally paid off. Now their side held the war's edge, and they weren't letting it slip. If they smash the enemy's leadership fast, this war won't drag on, but they've got to make that call right now. Deep inside the lab, Rate ripped open a sealed device built for top-tier strategic missions. A clone burst out of the mist, and with one silent nod, it was ordered to finish the assassination.